If everyone could take their seat, please, we are going to commence. Good evening. We are going to call the July Zoning Board of Adjustment to order at 8:09 p.m. Madam Secretary, would you please read the notice of this meeting?
The notice requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been satisfied with respect to this meeting of the Township of Verona Zoning Board of Adjustment, which is being held in person in the ballroom of the Verona Community Town Center, located at 880 Bloomfield Avenue, Verona. The time and date of this meeting were included in the annual meeting notice posted in the community center and sent to the official newspapers of the township, the Verona Cedar Grove Times and the Star Ledger, at least 48 hours preceding this time of this meeting. The agenda instructions on how to comment will be provided at the appropriate time. All meetings are recorded. Those wishing to speak at any public comment period should only provide their name and municipality. Street addresses are not required. Please be advised that should a member of the public choose to state their street address, it will not be redacted from the record.
Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let's start with some general information. This board deals with the issuance of variances from the Verona zoning ordinance. That ordinance establishes specific requirements for the land area in the township and regulates not only the uses permitted, but the size of lots, setbacks required, parking, signs, conditional uses, and numerous other such regulations. An applicant is never entitled to a variance. Applicants must meet specific criteria contained in the state municipal land use law by satisfying certain legal standards of proof. The burden is on the applicants to show that they should be granted the specific relief requested. Depending on the type of variance requested, applicants will need to prove special reasons, undue hardship, a balance of benefits, and other criteria. These are legal proceedings. Public meeting notices have been published, neighbors have been notified, applicants and their representatives will provide sworn testimony and be subject to cross-examination. Any action this board takes at this meeting will be memorialized in a resolution document prepared by our legal counsel that will be reviewed and adopted typically at our next regular meeting. At that time, any variances granted will become effective. That said, we are a board that conducts its business in a fairly informal manner. Applicants are sworn in, tell us what they want to do with their property and what they are asking the board to do. Board members will question witnesses, and then members of the public may question those witnesses. At the conclusion of the testimony, members of the public may make a statement regarding the application. After closing the public portion of the application, the board will deliberate and render a decision. If you're following along, this happens to be our annual reorganization meeting. Item D, reorganization of the Board of Adjustment. First thing we need to do is bring on our members or renew our members who expired on June 30th. We have one renewal and one new. Dr. Reese and Mr. Tully, welcome to the board. Council, This would be an opportunity to swear in Mr. Tully.
It would.
Yep.
I'm looking to see whether in my packet is the oath of office. Okay. Mr. Tully, and Dr. Reese, we can do them at the same time. You just have to remember your name as opposed to. Raise your right hand, please. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey.
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same
I will bear faith and allegiance to the same
and to the governments established in the United States
and to the governments established in the United States
and in this state
and in this state,
under the authority of the people,
under the authority of the
and
people,
that I will faithfully,
and that I will faithfully,
impartially,
impartially,
and justly
and justly
perform all the duties
perform
All
all
the duties
of the office of
of the office of
office of
Board of Adjustment alternate number 1,
Board of Adjustment alternate
number 2,
number 1,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. We will, for the record officially, Mrs. Murphy Braddock is on vacation. She is a renewal, and we will swear her back in at the next meeting. Which moves us down that we have a board in place. If we could, Madam Secretary, have a roll call?
Mr. Tully,
Yeah, here.
Dr. Reese. Here. Mr. Cortez. Mr. Ryan.
Here.
Mr. Mathewson.
Here.
Mrs. Bradkiss.
Mrs. Murphy.
Mrs. Murphy Braddock. Mrs. DiBartolo.
Here.
Vice Chairman Weston. Chairman McGinley.
Here.
Board Attorney Greg Macera.
Here.
Board Engineer Mr. Peter Tenkate.
Here.
Zoning Officer Ms. Kathleen Leash. Here. And Board Secretary. Here.
Good. Okay, first item here, nomination and election of a chairperson. I'd be more than happy to open the floor to nominations for a chairperson.
Mr. Chairperson, I would like to nominate you to continue as the chairperson for this board. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Motion and second. Is there anyone else? No one? Well, thank you.
And you've done a great job, and will continue to do so, in my opinion.
Well, hearing no others, we'll close nominations, and I guess we can, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Probably should record one abstention. Thank you very much. I appreciate the confidence and look forward to what I believe is my 17th year as chairman. Sometimes it's a surprise. I usually dress for the occasion.
You always hope we'll nominate somebody.
I hope. Okay, we'll try this here. We'll get some practice. Nomination and election of a vice chairperson. We have several people who are not here tonight.
And they're always suspect.
They make excellent candidates. Is there a nomination for a vice chairperson?
I would nominate Mr. Weston to continue as the vice chair.
Okay,
I would second that.
thank you very much. I'm going to go out on a limb and say there probably won't be any other nominations and move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Good, unanimous. Mr. Weston will continue to serve as vice chair. We need to appoint a Board of Adjustment secretary in accordance with Resolution 2024-11. And at this time, Malik Metwali is the person to be designated board secretary. So if someone would make that motion,
I'll move that, Mr. Chairman.
thank you. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. All right, moves us right along to setting up our schedule of meetings. Now that we know who we are and how we're going to do this, let's decide when we're going to do it. I would point out that we now have a schedule. This is probably the second or third one we've seen. There is one location change that we should note for the September meeting. There is going to be something in this room related to the elections, so we will be moving to the council chambers in the municipal building, which, okay, I'm the only one who's been here long enough to go back to when we were in that building. Thank you, Greg. We'll be a little closer, maybe a lot closer. Okay, so does anyone have any comments, changes, et cetera, on the proposed schedule that's been distributed?
Should let the public know, Mr. Chairman, that we are planning to move up the start time for next.
Yes. In the future, starting in August, our meetings will begin at 7:30 p.m. Unless we make a change. Is everybody good with that? Okay, anybody want to, did I hear a motion to approve the schedule as distributed?
So moved.
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Nobody's opposed to the schedule, right? Okay. Okay, so, not for nothing, but that brings us right down to the last item on the first page of the agenda, the approval of minutes from the last meeting. Hopefully, everyone's had time to review the extensive minutes. I have asked the secretary to see if we couldn't cut down on the minutes to some extent by trying to keep it to action items, items that change the direction of the meeting, less specific detail that can be picked up. Since we now record everything, it's easy enough to go back in and look for greater detail. However, I would just, let's see, I would just like to say the only amendment I would like to see on this set of minutes is all the way on page 15, in the vote at the 2/3 spot going down the page. It does not indicate a vote for Mr. Mathewson, which I believe was a no vote. Okay. So I would recommend that it be amended to include the no vote on Mr. Mathewson.
Do you need a second on that? I mean, I'll second it.
I was going to say, if someone would like to make a motion to approve the minutes
With your,
with my amendment.
I don't see my vote. Because I was the alternate, okay.
You got it. We good, folks? Okay, so someone would like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you.
second.
Thank you, Ted. Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Good. Moves us through the first page. Resolutions. We have two resolutions from the last meeting. First one is the matter of the application of the Scalpas Hospitality Group. That was 700 Bloomfield Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, just a reminder, only those present and voting in favor of the application should be voting on the resolution.
Okay.
With item number 2, on the applicant will install precipitator, we had mentioned that would be only if it was a side wall coming out of the side of the building. So if they're coming up through the roof, that they'd be able to just exhaust the building.
Okay, so we can amend number 2, that they'll install a precipitator if sidewall installation.
Could you repeat that, Dan?
Item number 2 on page 3.
No, I see that.
Okay. The applicant will install a precipitator, and the condition was if it's a sidewall installation on the
Well,
roof.
I believe the discussion, I went back and I did this, Paul is absolutely correct, but they did say they would install the precipitator, and then there was no design for going in through the roof. So if they want to not install the precipitator, they're going to have to seek some kind of design approval for going through the roof. So I didn't want
Oh, I
to,
see what you're saying.
I didn't want to put it unless they go through the roof, because they did not present testimony on how they would do that.
Oh, I understand. Okay.
Right, okay.
All right, that makes sense.
Looks at- Okay. that makes
So we'll leave it
easier.
as it is.
Leave it as
Okay.
is. All right, now. Okay, anybody remember who voted yes, so you can vote on this?
I'll move it, Mr. Chairman, because I believe I did vote yes on this.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
I'll second.
Okay, and as far as a vote is concerned,
If I can do a roll call.
well, whoever voted yes, okay? That's the only people that can vote on the motion.
Right.
Technically, we only need one
I
person.
think it was unanimous anyway.
It was unanimous. Yeah. So it's unanimous again for all of us here.
Yeah.
Okay? Next one's a little different.
So that just passes.
Yep, so that one is approved. Next one's the matter of the application of Rachel Wagner. That would be 12 Linwood Road, swimming pool in the rear yard. Counselor, that vote failed. So how, just the people who voted
Just the people who voted against the
against the application?
Yes.
Okay, so at this point, it would be,
I'll move.
right,
If you voted and it counted, you can vote on the resolution.
at this point, it was Mrs. Murphy Braddix, Mr. Mathewson, and me. So
I'll motion to approve this resolution, 2024-10.
Okay, and you and I will vote yes to approve this resolution.
Yes.
Did you catch all that? Perfect. Okay. To the minutes. Oh, moves us to new business. Okay, under new business, we had 4 applications for this evening. We have 2024-08, 48 Durrell Street. The applicant has requested to be carried from tonight to the August 8th hearing. If the board does not have a problem with that, we would need a motion to carry it to the August 8th meeting, and then we can move on.
I'll make a motion to carry it.
Motion
I'll second.
and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Application 2024-08 is carried to the August meeting without further notice. Application 2024-04, 68 Forest Avenue. Request for a swimming pool in a rear yard. The applicant has withdrawn the application. We need to accept the withdrawal without prejudice. So if I could have a motion to accept his withdrawal without prejudice?
So moves.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any Abstentions? All right. That brings us to item number 3, the application number 2024-09, which is 8 Randolph Place, Block 606, Lot 2. And if you could just remain standing, and our counselor will swear you in, and then we can proceed.
Can you state your full name for the record, please?
Sure, Michael Sarcone.
Mr. Sarcone, raise your hand. You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
And you, sir?
Eric Rowan.
And your business address, please? Or you're the planner?
I'm the landscape architect.
Okay. The name of your business, please, and its address?
My name is Eric Rowan, and the business is Verona Landscaping Services at 382 Verona Place in South Orange, New Jersey.
And can you raise your right hand? You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Please have a seat, gentlemen.
Chair, can we just do one little housekeeping reminder that when people are going to speak, that they please turn their microphones on, and when they are done speaking, that they please turn them off so we don't pick up any background conversations.
Mr. Sarcone, it's all yours.
Great.
Wait, just 1 second. If you would,
Yes.
usually when we have a professional, you're coming as a professional landscape architect, if you could just give us a little of your background and experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a licensed landscape architect in the state of New Jersey as well as California. I have a Master of Landscape Architecture degree from Cal Poly Pomona, and I am the landscape architect in responsible charge at Scalore Landscaping Services. I have about a decade of project experience as a project manager and project landscape architect, most of which was working for a civil engineering company as a landscape architect, and 2 years of which was working under the head landscape architect for the County of San Diego Planning Department, providing plan check services.
Have you testified before boards previously?
No.
Congratulations.
Mr. Rowan, your license is currently in effect in New Jersey.
It is.
Does anyone have a problem with accepting Mr. Rowan as an expert witness in landscape architecture? No. Good. Now, Mr. Sarcone, it's yours.
Great. Thank you and good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to address the board. My name is Michael Sarcone, and my family and I have lived in Verona for 4 years. Last year, we moved to a larger home with an extra bedroom after we had our 3rd child. Ultimately, we're looking to improve the usability of our backyard for our 3 small children, ages 5, 3, and 18 months, as well as for me and my wife, who's sitting back here, Amanda. First, we're applying for a variance to put a fence on top of a retaining wall in our rear yard for the safety of our children. So just to provide some context, as it currently stands, when you're looking at the front of our home, our driveway runs down the left side of the home and meets up with the rear yard, which is elevated above the driveway. Where the driveway meets the rear yard, there's a large retaining wall that increases in height from 3 feet at the low end of the yard all the way up to about 5.5 feet at the high end. So there's a portion of the rear yard that ends at the retaining wall and is effectively a 5.5-foot cliff, which presents a hazard for our children. So for us, for that first variance request, safety is the primary motivator there. And then second, we're applying for a variance to exceed the town's impervious coverage limits. We currently at the limit of 35%, and our proposed plan takes this up to 41%. So just some context around this particular request. Our rear yard has a pretty large slope, differences in elevation from the high point of the yard to various low points range anywhere from 8 to 12 feet. With the goal of usability in mind, we are looking to level the yard. So currently, this slope precludes us from using the swing set we brought with us from our prior home. It's currently disassembled and sitting in the rear of our driveway. Ultimately, we're looking to get the yard as level as possible, and that's going to require the construction of additional retaining walls. which add to our impervious coverage. We are also proposing to install a cement patio where we can put an outdoor table, some chairs, and a grill. And this would just provide a place to sit while minding the kids, and also make it a little more manageable to feed them all outside, weather permitting, and maybe save the mess in the kitchen. All in, this would take our impervious coverage from 35 to 41%. As part of this process, in the backyard, we have already removed 2 trees from the backyard. One was dead and one was an invasive species, both of which we received town approval for. We're also proposing to plant 10 to 15 trees as part of the project. Just one thing to mention on the storm water runoff, and Eric can speak to this more fully with his expertise, but given that we are leveling the yard, this should lessen the storm water runoff to our neighbor who is downslope of us, and we're also proposing to install a catch basin and a seepage pit to mitigate the runoff. And then just last thing to note, we have already built a mudroom and landing on the back of the house. Permits were approved by the town and all inspections have been passed. And our current 35% impervious coverage includes the mudroom and that landing. And then lastly, just because we did not have a grading plan approved at the time of the mudroom construction, we built a temporary landing and stairs. And so we're hoping to construct the permanent landing and steps once we have an approval on the grading plan.
Rather, since it's just the two of you that are witnesses, right?
Correct.
So rather than ask questions now, since they may be confused back and forth, let's hear from the landscape architect, and then we can ask questions appropriately.
Sure. So we're here seeking variances regarding impervious lot coverage and the maximum combined retaining wall and fence height requirement. So I would like to present and reference the updated grading plans that have been submitted as an exhibit, revised per engineering comments received June 25th, and Environmental Commission review received June 24th as an update to the initial formal submittal.
Mr. Rowan, you said a block title on the,
Yes.
and what is the block title on the plans, so you're going to mark them? So this is the grading, planting, and erosion control plan?
Yes,
you're
sir.
referring to?
Yes,
And it's dated 7/11/24?
correct.
You're going to introduce this as A1?
As an exhibit, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So I've also got site photographs enclosed for reference. And the existing site conditions are characterized by a steep slope, around a 15% average slope between the finished surface of the back of the driveway and the eastern property corner. And
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult. What pictures are you referring to specifically?
There were pictures in the new plan here.
Okay, pictures within the new plan?
they were enclosed,
Okay,
yes.
so they're just kind of enclosed? Okay. Okay. Mr. Rowe, did you take these pictures?
Michael did, Michael Sarcone.
Okay. Mr. Sarcone, if I could, you're referring to a picture of a basketball hoop that seems to be at the end of a driveway, the rear of your house, and your picture with some equipment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think we should mark these as the picture of the basketball hoop, A2. The next picture, which is the rear of the home, is A3. And I'm not sure why we're going to use that picture, but A4 will be the picture of Mr. Sarcone.
So you can tell the height of the wall.
Okay. And-
That's exactly correct.
Mr. Sarcone, when did you take these pictures?
So the picture with the basketball hoop and the picture with me in it were taken this afternoon, probably around 2 p.m. Eric, this might have, the other picture where you can see the hoop it's on its side in the driveway is clearly taken from a different time. That was probably several weeks ago. And Eric, I think you probably took that picture.
That's correct.
Is this a fair depiction depiction, are all three of these pictures a fair depiction of how the property looks today?
Yes.
So as Mr. Sarcone mentioned, a large portion of his backyard is unusable for passive recreation, a back patio, or comfortable seating, for example. Yard surface itself is non-uniform. There's undulations in the grade, and there's divots, which is a safety concern. Stormwater currently sheet flows from the neighbor to the east, through the backyard, towards the neighbor to the west. An existing retaining wall reaches a maximum 6-foot height and creates a significant drop-off between the yard and the driveway with no existing physical barrier to prevent serious fall and injury. The project itself proposes a leveling of the backyard using retaining walls and low boulder walls, where we have a 3.5-foot maximum height, exposed wall height in the eastern corner of the property. We're also providing access from the driveway to the backyard area via proposed concrete block steps. And we're also showing a black aluminum fencing as a guardrail system for safety. We're proposing green infrastructure in the form of a seepage pit to mitigate stormwater runoff, and landscape planting for privacy screening and to soften hardscape elements such as the patio walls and the fencing. The first variance item I would like to address is the combined wall and fence height maximum. So the initial grading plan submitted featured a 5-foot high black aluminum fence behind the existing retaining wall, as well as the proposed retaining wall for safety, which exceeded the 6-foot height maximum. In the revised exhibit, there's a new retaining wall proposed running in parallel with the existing, and we have a 3.5-foot offset from the face of the existing retaining wall to the face of the new retaining wall, so that it can be considered a separate standalone structure relative to the existing wall. And that has a black aluminum fence riding on top. And we are constrained due to the existing topography. However, in nearly all locations with the revised grading plan, we stay below the 6-foot maximum height restriction. Now, on the retaining wall in parallel with the existing, the new wall running in parallel to the existing wall, the fence steps down from a 5-foot height to a 4-foot height, which is called out on the plans. And there are 2 locations where the walls come out of the ground and reach approximately 2.5-foot height on either side of the steps, and which is evident in the top and bottom of wall callouts. So because we're proposing a 4-foot fence in certain limited locations and considering construction tolerances, we may end up with slightly north of a 6.5-foot combined height between the retaining wall and the fence. So we would like to open the discussion on whether the board would be amenable to a 7-foot high combined height between the retaining wall and the black aluminum fencing riding on top as a guardrail.
With no offset, correct? So you would still need a variance. You would need the variance, is what you're suggesting.
There is a horizontal offset of 3.5 feet, but what I'm drawing attention to is the combined height of the retaining wall plus the fence height. So if we have a 2.5-foot high retaining wall plus a 4-foot high fence, we're at 6.5 feet.
So it's directly on the retaining wall.
Yes,
Even though we're calling it offset, it's on the retaining wall.
correct. Yes,
All right.
But it's a new retaining wall.
that's a new retaining wall, correct.
Not the existing.
Right. Okay. And then on this,
On sheet 2, we do show a detail toward the top middle of the sheet, showing that we're coring through the concrete block and wet setting that post in. Also, in the planting plan on sheet 1, we are employing the use of evergreen shrubs to visually obscure the fence and the wall combination and to screen that and soften it. And also as a safety precaution to dissuade children from climbing on the wall and climbing up to a height where it reaches 6 feet. Our second variance item, impervious lot coverage, as Michael stated, we're at 41.1% as it stands for the patio, future deck steps, retaining wall, and steps from the driveway to the backyard. So as it stands, the site is currently at our maximum, which deprives the Sarcone family of the ability to have a back patio or from constructing retaining walls to create a usable backyard. The grading plans propose green infrastructure as a mitigation measure where stormwater from the patio will run off onto the lawn area, which has a gradual pitch of about 3% before it reaches the catch basin and is received by the seepage pit. The lawn will serve as an energy dissipator, a stormwater filter, and will facilitate a degree of infiltration before the runoff reaches the catch basin. Sheet 2 shows a detail and calculations for the seepage pit based on the square footage of the patio, retaining walls, landscape steps, and future deck steps, and the volume of which is calculated at the required 3-inch depth per square foot. And also on sheet 2 is an impervious lot coverage diagram, which provides a breakdown. And as far as additional mitigation, on the planting plan, you'll see that we're planting green giant arborvitae to screen the proposed patio from the neighboring property to the east. So we received engineering comments, which I would like to run through and address. Received from Boswell Engineering, dated June 3rd, 2024.
Revised.
Oh, I'm sorry, revised June, yes, 25th, correct.
Mr. Owen, just to avoid duplication, are there any of these conditions that you would not agree to meet and that need to be discussed?
No.
Okay, so it's your testimony that everything set forth in this engineering review, if the board were inclined to give approval, you're fine as a condition of approval?
Yes, sir. So we are in the process of engaging a civil engineer for certain of the comments that require us to do so. So the answer is yes.
Mr. Tenkate, that's okay with you?
Yes.
So comment number 10, construction detail, well, or do you not want me to run through these comments? Because we're absolutely fine with satisfying. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's it.
And the same is true of the environmental commission comments that we received.
And you're referring to the environmental commission letter dated, I'm sorry?
June 24th. So I can conclude by stating that as it stands, the Sarcone family is currently suffering a hardship due to their inability to install a backyard patio and safely enjoy their property. We're aiming to improve the existing condition in a manner that is functional, aesthetically pleasing, mitigates stormwater runoff, protects safety and welfare, provides ornamental vegetation to soften and screen the improvements, while also ultimately aiming to satisfy all board requirements and conditions. Thank you for your time.
Good presentation.
And Mr. Chairman, just for my own clarification, the tree issue technically doesn't exist anymore because he had them appropriately removed, is that correct?
Yes. Okay, so we're looking at a fence wall combination that may exceed 6 feet by as much as up to 7 feet. And we're looking at drainage, impervious coverage. So you want to address, first, let's go through some of the mechanics. Does anyone have any questions of these applicants? Does anyone from the public have any questions from these applicants on the material that they've presented this evening?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, before you go to discussion, the applicants certainly have a burden under the municipal land use law. A C1 variance can be issued if the board determines that there are exceptional topographic conditions that warrant the issuance of the variance, which would have to do with the height and arguably the impervious. The board should not focus on the hardship to the owners because that's really not the standard, although that was what was presented. It would be, does this piece of property, because of the unusual topography as was testified to, does that constitute a hardship that would lead to the issuance of the variances?
It's like when you go to court, the judge tells you how the jury's supposed to frame it.
I do have a question. So based on the photographs and based on the plan, the concrete patio goes directly up to the house, correct?
Correct.
So I've been in this house before it was yours. There's no means of access out on that. There's no direct access from the first floor to the patio, correct? Right.
The access is via the mudroom.
Right.
And there's no other access.
So I guess just practically speaking, I mean, it's a pretty big patio, and I always encourage people to realistically think about how much space they're taking up and what they're actually going to use it for. So would you ever entertain reducing the impervious coverage to not be right up against the house? Because that's it's a dark corner in there. Just like circulation-wise, you're going to come out of your sliding doors and probably go towards the main part of the back house. That just feels like it's an area that we can save on some impervious coverage.
We are willing to do that.
We sized the patio according to the furniture layout that we had discussed, a seating area, outdoor dining, and a grill area. I did initially have a planting area in between the house as foundation planting and the edge of the patio. I started to get a little concerned about the heat being generated by the back of the grill where we had it situated, but if we are able to maintain the same square footage that we're currently proposing, I think that we can make that work to push that out into the yard or get creative or make that work.
I think her question was also, have you considered reducing the size of the patio? Your answer is, you looked at it from patio furniture standpoint, you can't.
I think he's asking if you took the existing patio or the proposed patio as it's proposed today and just shifted it versus reducing the size of it. I'm asking if you could reduce the size of it.
Yeah, we're willing to reduce the size of it.
How much?
I mean, is there a impervious coverage that you get more comfortable with versus 41.1%?
In a lot of
35? 35?
In a lot of properties, depending on the zone, the coverage is usually 40%. So 41, 42 is good. In this particular zone, it's an R70 zone, the coverage is 35%. So a little less than, where you are now, someplace in maybe the high 30s. And if my calculations are correct, for every 1% you remove, you'd have to take out close to 100 square feet. Yeah. So if you're at 40, 41, that would not be unusual for the town. your lot is a little bigger. I think whatever you can do, and we're going to have to set a number to it for the removal of the patio adjacent to the house, that would go toward getting you, let's see, I'll give you a guesstimate. Yeah. Well, 0.5%.
What do you need for a planter to be a legitimate planting area between the house and the patio?
We would like to see 3 feet.
So if you take 3 feet from there, you can get what you need, and
It's like 15 or so. It's like probably 45. Okay.
You might be about, I think that could be accurate, about 50 square feet. So,
But again,
plus or minus.
this goes back to the needs of your program. I don't want to step on your program. If you're married to, specific layout, then that's what you should present. But just the question was really, had you thought this through, and does that make more sense over what is currently proposed? The only other nitpicky thing, I love to see bubble drawings when there are changes, because this was just thrown on my lap and I don't know what's changed, and just for future reference.
Understood.
So is it that the applicant has agreed to reduce the size of the patio, again, if there's approval, from where, if you could explain in layman's terms, with measurements, so it's from the patio where it is?
From the rear facade of the house, adjacent to the mudroom, offset 3 feet or whatever is acceptable to the board as far as square footage goes, but at a minimum of 3 feet to accommodate the planting of shrubs and foundation planting.
So 3 feet, so if you go 3 feet from the house, all the way, the entire width of the patio?
Correct. Where it currently abuts the foundation of the house. Correct.
Have you considered like the front walkway? Because when I was there, that thing was totally pointless. The entirety of the front walkway.
I have considered some of the front walkway as well. I mean, for that patio in the back, if we have 3 feet off the house, 15 feet, that's close to 50 square feet. Then on the other side of that patio, if we pull it back 2 or 3 feet, that's another 50. That gets you 100. That's a percentage.
I'm not sure I heard that the board was requesting you do that. That's up to the board, but it's,
Based on my scaling, 3 feet off the house, taking that patio out, is about 45 square feet.
Can you go to deliberation now?
sure.
I'm following.
I just got one question.
Okay.
I just got one question. When I'm seeing the drainage coming from the seepage pit, and it's coming to the driveway with an overflow, is that how it's designed to do? And then what, if it's an overflow and it comes down the driveway?
Yes, correct.
That's something that we can do.
And where does it just pool on the driveway? Because there's no trench drain in there, I don't think. There is there?
It would sheet flow out toward the street.
And in your judgment, how much of a rainfall do you need to have for that to fill?
The seepage pit, at least as it's detailed and calculated on sheet 2 of the plans, is significantly oversized. And it depends on what, our percolation test would yield to say what kind of infiltration do we have. But we would hope that it would be a rare occurrence that the overflow would be active.
And does the overflow go down? It appears there's a grass strip on the other side of the pavement. Does that flow across that grass? Or does it empty right into the paved driveway?
It would outlet through the Belgian block curbing into the driveway itself.
it would outlet through the Belgian block curb into the driveway.
And daylight into the driveway, yes.
Yes, but what would there be a problem if we didn't have the overflow? It fills up a little bit, seeps into the grass, and goes back down at the end of the night.
Yeah, I mean, if our percolation test yields that we have really good infiltration, for example, I agree, the overflow may not be necessary.
I have one question. You right now have one area where it's collecting the water, which is over by the stairs. But I feel where all the water is landing on the concrete patio, that water runoff is happening either right down to the driveway or to the back, I guess.
Right, so
It would be nice to see like another capture somewhere on the other side of the lot.
There's a 1.5% pitch to the patio, which drains onto the lawn, and then it would essentially curve around and gently sort of swale toward that catch basin. But if the comment is that you think that we may need an additional catch basin to more immediately capture that runoff that flows off of the patio, we'd certainly be amenable to that. My thinking was in line with green infrastructure practices that we could allow the lawn to filter and dissipate some of the energy and receive that runoff before it makes its way to the area drain.
Mr. Chairman, if the board were inclined to grant the application, I think that's something that Mr. Tenkate could be subject to Mr. Tenkate's approval as far as the adequate, to take into consideration, obviously, your concern.
Could you talk a little bit more about the retaining wall and the fence that is supposed to go on top of that retaining wall? It would appear by the picture A2 that your neighbor in the back already has fencing. Is this a repeat of the fencing that your neighbor in the back has, or am I misreading this? Could you just describe what you plan for the back of the yard, and also the need for that much privacy?
Sure. So I can start with explaining the fence, and then Eric could talk about the green infrastructure. So the lot is actually a little bit weird in that our neighbor to the east, so when you're looking at our house, our neighbor to the right has that corner lot, but they also have a small sliver of land that runs behind our property, in between our property and our neighbors on the other side. So where you see that fence, maybe like 20 feet from that fence, that's my neighbor's property back there. So that's a separate neighbor's fence, not mine. If that makes sense. It's just a weird structure of my neighbor's property.
It appears to me that you want to repeat this fence by adding another one in front of it. Am I correct?
You mentioned privacy. Why did we need that level of privacy? So the sole purpose of all the black aluminum fencing on this project is for safety precautions. So in that scenario where that fence returns in parallel with the rear property line, there's not a significant drop-off, but there is a drop-off from the finished grade of the lawn area that's being levelized and the bottom of wall. So we just didn't want the kids to be running after a ball and fall off a 1-foot wall. So a visual cue to know that you're not falling off a 2-foot wall when you're playing football.
Following up on Dr. Reese's point, and just I did drive by the property today. Your pictures are a very accurate description of what it looks like. But to Dr. Reese's point, there is an aluminum fence, which your wife, in full disclosure, saw me looking at the property. She explained to me that the fence was the neighbor's. Okay. My question, after hearing from Dr. Reese, reminded me, if you put up a fence what's going to be in the middle of those two fences? I mean, I'm having a difficult, are we just going to create an area where garbage is going to collect and nobody is going to be able to get at it to clean it out?
No, that's a good question. So I didn't explain it well the first time. That property in between those two fences is my neighbor's property to the right of my home. So they have access from their yard all the way through.
Okay, but is he still going to have enough, to follow up on my question, is your neighbor on the right-hand side, and I get, so it's almost like a, he's got like a little, almost like a panhandle.
Yeah.
It's like a flagpole.
Okay, so is he, if you put a fence up in front of the existing one, is he going to have enough space to maintain his piece of property? You know, in other words, how much distance between your fence and the neighbor's fence is there going to be? That's the easiest way to say it.
Sure, I think it's like 20 or 25
Gonna be
feet.
that much? Okay.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, that clears things up. But it's hard to tell from the diagram. Yeah, okay,
It's not a small piece of property that he has back there.
okay.
And you're talking about boulders here. Am I correct? Am I looking at this correctly?
Yes.
Talk about safety. How large are these boulders going to be?
They're going to range in size from about 1 to 2 feet in diameter. And so as there's less difference in elevation or slope existing, we're employing the use of landscape boulders as that kind of dies into grade for a more naturalistic appearance. And when it's doing very minor retaining.
But that also because the slope is so severe, it is a very severely sloped property. I don't see any doubt in my
You're
mind.
planning on leveling off? Excuse me for.
Sure, no, go ahead.
You're planning on leveling off? Am I correct that you're planning on leveling off this property?
Correct.
And you still need the boulders?
Yes, the retaining wall, the segmental block wall are performing the heavier lift. And when the slope or difference in elevation is not as significant, we're embedding boulders into grade as that dies down. And it's not so high of a wall that's needed.
When you talk about leveling off, there's still going to be a sloped part towards
Behind it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
so in
You're
every,
leveling off a platform.
yes,
As I see it, and jump in if I'm not explaining it properly, but you're basically making a platform down below part of the slope to put your playground equipment and your patio in. Is that correct? More or less? Okay.
correct. Yeah, there's a boulder low wall detail on sheet 2 in the lower right. And so that's the proposed condition.
I have a couple questions. How long have you lived here?
1 year.
Okay. Does the basement flood?
It hasn't, but when we moved in, because of issues we had in our previous home, we put French drains in.
Okay. And they're on the inside of the house, not the outside?
Inside.
Where do you park?
In the driveway.
In the front or the back?
Near the front.
Okay. The reason I'm asking this is just from a circulation standpoint. If you were to park in the back, that's where your garage is, right? Getting from the driveway, you'd have to go all the way around to the back of the house if that were ever something that you do. Just to give a different kind of sequence of circulation, kind of a more straight shot to the mudroom. I just wonder if that was studied or anything.
So ultimately, what we'd like to do is use that rear entrance and that mudroom as the primary entrance and exit from the home. So we could pull the cars back there and use that as the primary. Because as it stands right now, when we park in the driveway, I don't generally walk across the front lawn. I walk around on the sidewalk and all the way up that long path that you're familiar with. And so, yeah, that's kind of a pain for the groceries and whatnot.
Yeah. So similar to that, is this then the best solution for your long-term needs then, if you're anticipating parking in the back someday?
If you take a look at the initial grading plans that were submitted, that the condition that you described, if I'm correct in that, that is what we reflected, and that's what we initially proposed. The issue with that was if we're going to essentially run the back steps in line with that existing retaining wall, we're going to need to ride a fence or guardrail right behind that existing retaining wall, and the combined fence height was just too great. It would be upwards of, 10 feet or more.
Well, we seem to have a lot of questions after I thought we finished asking questions. So, do we have any additional questions for for this applicant? If not, I would move that we close the public portion of the meeting and go to board deliberation. And it seems as though we have two variances that need to be addressed. One is the fence on retaining wall issue, and the other one is the impermeable surface. So let's discuss. We're looking at a fence that could be 6 foot tall by itself. It may range anywhere from 6 foot to a maximum of 7 foot.
The height of the fences themselves would range between 4 and 5 feet in height. The combined height could potentially reach a maximum of 7, but we are trying to avoid that. We want to make an effort to avoid that, just so it's not like we're building a fortress. We want to avoid that condition in the field.
And the fence you're proposing is the one that's in the picture, which is fairly see-through.
Yes, correct. Black aluminum fencing.
And it's similar to the fencing that exists on the property in back, correct? I think there is black aluminum fencing.
Yes.
So do you know how high that fence is? I'm just curious, on the neighbor's property? Just give me an estimate.
I would guess 4 feet
4 feet?
would be my guess.
And I'm just looking at it from aesthetic purposes, as are we going to have a, one here, one there kind of thing. But do you think it would be in line with what's already existing on the other property?
Yes, it would be in the ballpark of that fence height.
What are people's thoughts on that particular combination being acceptable or not?
I mean, me personally, I do not have a problem with the fence and the retaining wall. I mean, it was something that I would probably propose for myself if I had kids at that age. I know we're not supposed to talk about the family and that safety, but you almost cannot separate it, and I think that is something that's important. I think it's something that at the end of the year, when we reconsider our rules, that maybe this is one of them.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could ask counsel to articulate, I think it was interesting what he said about the C1 variance in relation to the slope just being a factor.
A slope is definitely a factor in your hardship,
Right.
that due to an unusual shape, like a narrowness, topo, slope, which is really topo, then that would constitute the basis for issuing a hardship variance.
Because in my layman's opinion, having looked, closely at the physical property, not just at the blueprint, in my opinion, it certainly would fall into that category. It is a very unusually top piece of topography, so I would be inclined to grant the variance based upon your explanation.
So my next door neighbor actually did this where they built up the entirety of the grade. So they're surrounded by 3 giant retaining walls. And they actually wound up putting, and I don't know the terms, but it's a fence that's almost like a horse stable fence, the 2 horizontals and then the whatever verticals every 8 feet on center or something. And for lack of a better term, like the chicken wire, whatever that is.
You're showing your young.
I don't know.
Post-it rail?
Yeah, anyway.
And I know they're not
Point-
here, but
Point
sorry.
being, sorry, let me finish. Point being, it's far more transparent than I think this is going to be. I think that once this is up, it's going to be a little obtrusive visually. Food for thought.
I can talk to that. My neighbor has 900 feet of that fence going around a very large lot. And because it's black, you can pretty much see right through it. So it's, I didn't anticipate, and your neighbor is the same thing. If you look, you can see it if you're looking for it, but it doesn't jump right out at you. So this is close. As long as it's not that solid, yeah.
As long as it's not vinyl, so what you're going to say.
Selling any vines.
Is there any consideration to a fence with less height too? 4 foot?
What's the code requirement for the fence in this situation?
I don't think there's a minimum because there's no pool involved.
No, it is, though, you do have like a fall, so you can start like a railing type, right? So, I think you'd want to be railing height.
Can I make the assumption that you've kept your neighbors in the loop on what you're proposing to do? I know no one has spoken against it, but I always like to know what the applicant's interaction with their immediate neighbors has been.
Yeah, sure. So our neighbors to the right, they are aware, and all our neighbors within 200 feet of us received notice that they could come to this hearing, but yes. And my neighbor to the left, unfortunately, Carol D'Elia passed a few weeks ago. We did tell her about it, but I don't know what her son's plans are for that house. But yeah, we informed our neighbors.
So no strong objections to the fence on the wall? Okay. How about the impervious coverage? We actually had the applicant reduce impervious coverage. And whatever plan that they have in the way of mitigation is going to be reviewed by engineering when they go for permits. Does anyone have concerns that we should discuss about that?
If I understood the conversation correctly, they've agreed to meet all of the conditions that the engineer and the environmental commission laid out. So I don't think they could have been more cooperative, in terms of accepting the recommendation. So I would be inclined to support that, and the fact that they seem to be willing to work with the engineer, on any issues that come up would, lead me towards, approving a variance.
Good. So it sounds like we're at a point where we could have a motion to, I could entertain a motion to approve this application as amended with the conditions that we've identified, such as reducing the patio, adherence to the engineering report, adherence to the environmental commission's recommendations.
What number are you going to use for the impervious coverage variance? Is it the number given or the number given less 45 square feet?
I think we'll use the number given. That's the way you calculated your original materials, and it's not going to save you a whole lot.
But conditioned upon, it's the number given, but they're reducing the number given.
They did reduce.
But we don't know the exact amount. So whatever the number comes up with after reducing 3 feet times the width of the patio at the mudroom. Right, Peter?
Right, if that's what you're on.
Right.
Yeah, I think that seemed to be the consensus, but.
Okay.
I would use a hard number, 45 square feet. I think it's.
Okay.
Yeah, we could do that. That comes out to 45 square feet?
Yeah, minimum 45. Okay, so frame that way, Is there anyone who'd like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion to approve this proposal per the conditions granted.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Madam Secretary, may we have a roll call vote?
Mr. Tully?
Approved.
Dr. Reese? Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Mathewson?
Yes.
Mrs. DiBartolo?
Yes.
Chairman McGinley?
Yes, we'll make it unanimous. As I said at the beginning, we approved that officially in a resolution at our next meeting, which will be in August. You won't be able to pull permits until that time, but you can do a little more calculation and move some stuff around. Good luck with your project.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see if I can find the agenda, Counselor. Counselor, do we want to break for 2 minutes just before you start, 5 minutes before you start? This way you can get your stuff together?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can get it set up.
We'll take an official break until 9:25.
Right here, good.
Perfect. What was I?
It shows the sun and actually and later. Yeah, I didn't. So you're gonna get in there? And you just hear
The counties are really sensitive to it. Nothing to say.
Are we ready to get?
Okay, if everybody is ready, we will resume at 9:27. Okay, the next application on the agenda is application 2024-10, 30 Pompton Avenue. We good? Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. Application 2024-10, 30 Pompton Avenue. Mr. Dusenberry, it's yours.
Housekeeping, Mr. Chairman, does the red light mean I'm on or off?
Red light means you're on.
Okay, so you hear me fine?
We can. And,
Thank you.
And just for the record, I believe council will tell us that we have jurisdiction to hear this.
Yes, and I will affirm that at our last meeting, jurisdictional facts were confirmed in order to allow you to adjourn us to this evening, and we thank you for hearing us tonight. For the record, Mr. Chairman, I am Jack Dusenberry. I am an attorney at law representing the applicant. My office is at 155 Passaic Avenue in Fairfield. So, if I may have a brief opening statement, but before I do that, why don't we just swear my first witness in and get that out of the way so I can go right into him.
State your name and address for the record, please. Sure.
Gregory Rapp, Lakeview Engineering, 70 South Orange Avenue, Livingston, New Jersey.
Mr. Rapp, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Sit. Sit, 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 sit. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that I see a count of 6 tonight, including the 2 alternates. The applicant will go forward with the count of 6, knowing that we perhaps, depending on how this goes and your deliberations go, we might need 5 of you to vote affirmatively in favor of this. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that in a couple of minutes. This is the application for 30 Pompton Avenue, which is the technical number for what you all commonly know as the Chase Bank building at the corner of Pompton Avenue and Claremont Avenue, right generally in the Bloomfield Avenue, Pompton Avenue intersection area. This is lot 44, block 202. It is a large, large lot. A lot of people don't realize that it is one single lot that contains 5 uses. Those 5 uses are the Acura dealership, Famous Ray's Pizzeria, the office which was formerly the Huntington Learning Center, the Pompton Spa, and then what was the Chase Bank and is now proposed to be, the secret's out, Starbucks. So it's a uniquely shaped property. It fronts on Bloomfield Avenue for a fair length for the auto dealership. It then curves around up and fronts on Pompton Avenue, and then has a short frontage on Claremont with an entrance from Claremont, 2 entrances and right turn in, right turn out on Pompton Avenue from the 2 parking lots on the site. So it is kind of an interesting site because the Acura dealership is a non-conforming use in what is the zone we're in, which is the extended town center. The other uses are permitted. The Chase Bank was a permitted use, and now we're replacing it with what is also permitted use. It's a restaurant, technically under your ordinance. It does have an internet coffee house kind of facility, and I think part of the definition of a restaurant includes that. So I think we're all on the same page that the uses are permitted. Now, there are 2 ways you can look, well, actually, let me go back to a little bit of history here. And this is kind of tipping the hand on how old I might be, but I remember White Castle on the corner. We certainly remember the Claremont Diner. We remember the National Community Bank, which was where Chase evolved to, which was originally put in 1987. And all of these uses are principal uses on a single parcel. They have been non-conforming in that regard, multiple principal uses on a single lot, for more than 50 years. And that's the way it's been going. Now, to further complicate matters, in 2016, and the only one of you who will remember this is Chairman McGinley, this board had an application before it for the Acura dealership to expand its entrance, to expand the canopy over the front, to allow some front yard automobile parking and other things. The ETC zone existed then. It's referenced in that resolution, and nothing was said about the lack of buffer along the entire rear of the site. Nothing was said about impervious coverage. Nothing was said about the conditional use issue of having 20% open space. This board approved those changes, but focused exclusively on the accurate portion of the site. So tonight, we're asking you to kind of, we have to look at this technically as one large property with multiple principal uses, but we also have to recognize and acknowledge that the Acura dealership functions separately from the easterly end of the property. On the easterly end, we've got Famous Ray's, Huntington, Pompton Spa, now to have Starbucks with their own discrete parking. It's not shared with the Acura too much, or not at all, really. And we really don't use the Acura, although when you look at it from a site size perspective, you have to look at the whole site, and we comply with parking. So you have two ways you can view this. You can view it as an application before you for pre-existing principal uses on a single parcel, non-conforming pre-existing principal uses with a pre-existing impervious coverage of about 89%, with a pre-existing drainage system. The applicant is not proposing any new construction, or we're using the footprint of the same building. It, in essence, in a simple way, is swapping out one existing use for one permitted existing use for a permitted new use. And your analysis could focus, or should focus, I think, on what are the slight differences that does entail, and are they meaningful, right? Second way of looking at it, a little more technical, a little more lawyer-like, is the ETC zone does permit multiple principal uses, but it says we permit it as conditional uses. And then you have to meet the conditions. There are about 5 of them. We meet all but 2. And the 2 we don't meet are having 20% open space on the lot and 15-foot buffers between the site and adjacent residential dwellings. Hey, we don't comply with either of those because they're pre-existing non-conforming conditions. So you might look at it tonight as, all right, how do we look at the D3 variances? Do we need full testimony from a planner with all the justification, or is it really because they're existing pre-existing nonconformities? Do we really look at whether or not there's any mitigation available to make those existing conditions any better? So we're gonna, we believe tonight, show you that we're pretty much stuck with what we have. So now, I've told you the 2 ways you can look at it. I think both equally turn on the same analysis, and that's the pre-existing non-conforming conditions. Whether you look at the whole site as a non-conforming, or you look at this as 2 D3s in the conditional use application, it turns all on the same issues. All right. I will throw one little monkey wrench into it, another one, I guess. I already had threw one in. And that is that when looking at the conditional use form of analysis, you do have one of the 5 uses is non-conforming, and that's the Acura dealership, which effectively isn't the functioning aspect of the site that you're going to hear about this evening, but it's still technically there, and you might feel more comfortable simply saying this is a change of use, permitted to permitted. The pre-existing nonconformities are there, recognized. We've looked at the site plan, what the changes are, and we feel that the mitigation is as adequate as it can be, and you find your way to approve it with that analysis. So either way, I think it turns on the same facts, which we're going to present you. And as we look at the relief, we've got 2 categories of relief. So it's 4 variances. Technically, I'll call the D3s variances for the sake of discussion. But those are related to the conditional use, and both of those are the pre-existing non-conforming conditions. So to me, that's one category of the four, two of the four. The other two are related to the signs. By any analysis, they are new requests. By any analysis, they need planning testimony to affirm that the building sign, which we're asking for a 5-foot sign because the standard Starbucks sign instead of your permitted 4 on the north side of the building. And then we're asking for a pylon sign, 25 feet tall, up on the Claremont-Pompton corner so that people can see where this building is. We're going to give you a lot of facts that we think you can rely on to find justification for that pylon sign. As a brief aside, in 2020, I think, this board denied the pylon sign request for the Acura dealership. Different set of facts. If you go back, and I gave you both of these resolutions that I'm referring to in your packet. So perhaps you had a chance to refresh your recollection, or for those of you who weren't there to read it for the first time. The pylon sign for the Acura, it's not res judicata, it's a different location than we're presenting it, different set of facts, and that was denied essentially because of the prominence of the Acura, the DCH building and its building sign. This board found that it didn't need a pylon sign. Okay. We hope to present to you this evening that our facts are totally different. The location of this bank building and its setback and the proximity of the emergency care building, we hope to show you really creates a need for advanced visibility of Starbucks, because we don't want people at the last minute slamming on their brakes or doing a crazy Ivan turn from the left lane to the right lane to get into the driveway because they just now saw the building. So we'll talk about that. As we present our testimony tonight, I'd like you to keep a few things in mind because I think they're really important for you to focus on in coming to a decision about this application. First of all, we are installing a traffic light, a traffic signal. I should use signal because traffic light, people think I'm talking about overhanging lights for illumination. I was kind of slapped when I used the wrong term by certain people. So it is a traffic signal. This applicant is installing a traffic signal at the Claremont-Pompton intersection. It's a separate project. It's fully approved, and it's going to be built regardless of what happens with this application. It has been bonded. You'll hear from our traffic consultant that it is going to happen. All right, and you'll hear the details about that. So even though it's helpful and material and it goes to how Starbucks will operate, and we'll talk about that later with our experts, but it will happen regardless of what tenant goes in. Starbucks, Taco Bell, whatever it might end up being, the light's going to be there. All right, number two, the signal's being paid for by the applicant. And we'll make this, yeah, they're doing it because the Chase Bank building has been empty for, I was advised tonight, nearly 7 years because it's so difficult to get in and out of. We haven't been able to find a good tenant. So it became readily apparent that a traffic signal at this intersection was very important for this site, but also, you're going to hear from our traffic people, this is a huge intersection in terms of accidents and people just being forced to do crazy things trying to get in and out of Claremont, and this will be an improvement for the community at large. So the signal is going to happen, and the applicant is paying, and I am going to tell you it's probably now pushing close to $1 million. All right. Third point to keep in mind as you hear your testimony, Starbucks will not have a drive-through, will not ever ask for a drive-through. You can throw a condition in an approval that says there will never be a drive-through, and that's okay, because this site is not a good site for a drive-through. You've all seen the one over in Wayne where the backup for the drive-through lane backs up into the parking lot. We're not doing that, okay? Number two on that aspect, Starbucks will not have curbside service. So you can't go on your app, order something, and sit in your car at the curb in a designated parking spot and get curbside service. So those are two things to keep in mind, because it makes a big difference, I think, in everybody's reasonable mind when they think of Starbucks. What's the first thing you think about? Oh my gosh, are they going to have a drive-through? No, no drive-through. All right, number four, and I only have 4 and 5, so I'll be done and we'll get with some testimony in a minute. I know you don't want to hear me. 9 years ago, this applicant dedicated 12 feet of Pompton Avenue in width, the entire frontage from Claremont down to Bloomfield, which by my reckoning was over 350 feet times 12 square feet, or 12 feet in width. It was for the right turn lane. I'm sure you all remember when that got installed. So you could come down to Bloomfield Avenue and all of a sudden, oh, now there's a right turn lane. Well, that was because this applicant dedicated a 12-foot strip without compensation to make the intersection better. Well, we're going to show you some pictures of what that strip looked like 9 years ago, because that strip was lush lawn, shrubs, shade trees, open space, all of which was lost. All right, last point, and this I actually touched on already, and that is the accurate dealership functions independently from the other uses on the site, and you've approved, as I mentioned, the site plans for that one. In the adjacent leasehold, by the way, to the west, the accurate dealership functions not just with our lot, but also with the lot adjacent to it on the west. You approved the connecting driveway to that in 2016. So keep those things in mind. I think they're real important in your thought process and in how this site is going to function and what's going to make Starbucks, in my view, a welcome asset to Verona. I know if you've got your mug already, you can get in line and get ready, and Starbucks would like to get started. The place has been gutted, and you may know that there was a fire already when they were trying to get the old safe out of the building. They caused the fire, and I will parenthetically tell you, the fire trucks didn't go on site. They fought it from Pompton and Claremont. So we'll talk about that when we get the fire safety. All right.
Do we have to acknowledge if we like Starbucks better than Dunkin'? Does that preclude us from being able to vote?
I will go on the record right now and say I don't care.
Okay, good.
Okay. All right, so I have no bias in that regard. Okay. And keep in mind here, my client tonight is EVI Realty, the owner of the property. We're the ones with this application because we think that a restaurant, whether it's Starbucks or some other use, is appropriate for this site, and that's why we're submitting the application in our name. Starbucks will testify this evening. We have a representative as our second witness. Our first witness will be Mr. Rapp, who's to my right, who is our civil engineer, our PE, and then we will have our rep from Starbucks. Then we will have, if we get to it, Mr. Jar, who is our traffic consultant, to talk about those things. So without any further hearing from Jack Dusenberry, let's hear from Greg Rapp. All right? All right, Mr. Rapp. Let's first qualify you as a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. Will you tell the board your educational background and your engineering experience, how long you've been a professional engineer, and tell the board where you have been qualified as an expert in professional engineering here in the state of New Jersey before zoning or planning boards. You're on.
Sure. I graduated from Rutgers University with a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering in 2000. I've been licensed since 2005, and I've been practicing full-time for 24 years now. My license is in good standing. I've testified in front of various boards in the state, including City of Newark, Garfield, Union Township, Fairview, Paramus, Rockaway, just to name a few.
I'd open the board for questions of any of his credentials.
Anybody have any questions? You're good with Rutgers? Good.
I told him to lie and say NJIT, but he wouldn't do it.
It's all right. It's points for honesty.
Yeah.
We will accept Mr. Rapp as a professional engineer.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Rapp, you were retained by the applicant to provide engineering services for this application and testimony here tonight.
I was.
All right, and you're fully familiar with the site and the site plans that you're presenting this evening?
I am.
All right, although they were signed by another engineering firm, you are with Brightview and you're here tonight to give the testimony.
Correct, yes.
All right, will you give us a general description of the site, please? And before we do that, I see you put up on your easel an aerial photograph. This is not a part of the plan submission, is it?
It is not.
Mr. Massera, I've already marked it A1 with today's date,
Thank you.
and that is an aerial exhibit that you created.
Yes.
Will you tell us what that exhibit depicts?
Sure, it shows the existing aerial view of the site, the surrounding areas. We do have a line that goes around the circumference of the property. And each building that currently exists on the site is hatched and labeled.
Is your date?
The date is today.
That's dated. Thank you. Okay, will you tell us just general things about the lot, the size, how many buildings?
Yep.
I've already told the board about the uses, but you can tell them that I got it right or not.
Yeah, so the lot is 3.2 acres in area. There are 3 existing buildings on the site. John already went over it, but there is the DCH Acura dealership at the corner of Bloomfield and Pompton. Then there's a Ray's Pizza building in the middle of the site, just north of the Acura dealership. And then at the corner of Pompton and Claremont is the former Chase building, which is now proposed to be the Starbucks.
All right. Is there a gate between the easterly section of the site and the rear of the Acura dealership?
There is.
Will you just hop up for a second and point to the board? I want you to show exactly, all right there, and that gate is locked, correct?
That gate is locked, and that's used exclusively by the Acura dealership.
All right, so we just outlined with your pen for the board the effective use area shared by the 2 buildings and the 4 uses that are the subject of tonight's application.
Sorry, I have a red pen, so it's not showing up the most, but everything to the northeast of that line.
Okay, if I were to have the board look at the application package and the photo array, you've seen the photograph in it, the aerial that has the red outlining of this easterly end of the lot?
Correct.
Okay, so that includes then what I'll call the lower parking lot, which is just south of Ray's, the Ray's building, the parking lot behind Ray's, the parking lot between the Ray's building and the Starbucks, and then the area that surrounds the Starbucks itself, correct?
Correct.
So that's effectively the use area we're focusing on tonight. Okay. Let's talk about parking. Right, get right into it. We show 170 spaces for the entire site. That includes the Acura dealership, doesn't it?
That does, yes.
Okay. By that calculation, though, we only need, and this is reflected in the Boswell engineering letter, 112 sites based on the uses, or parking spaces.
Which site as a whole?
All right, so for the site as a whole, we have more than ample parking.
We do.
Okay. Now, let's look, though, at the effective site, and I'll call it our use area, which is around our 2 buildings, our 4 uses. Those uses add up, based also confirmed in the Boswell engineering review, to a need from those uses of 72 parking spaces, correct?
72 parking.
And how many does the applicant provide after we included the 5 parallel spaces along the residential property?
We have 70 parking spaces for those 2 units.
Okay, so effectively, we just about meet the exact requirement.
We do.
All right, 27 is the requirement for Starbucks, is it not?
Correct.
All right, and that surrounding area, surrounding the Starbucks building, has 27 parking spaces, doesn't it?
Correct. There's currently, we're currently getting 5 along that westerly property line, and that will bring it up to standard for the Starbucks on the 3 sides. not including the parking directly adjacent to the spa and the raised pizza building.
Okay, so,
You're not including them.
no,
We're not,
no. So effectively, around the Starbucks building, you have the 27 it needs.
yes,
Correct. Now, that 27 is based on seat count, is it not?
correct.
And the seat count requirement for Starbucks is 1 parking space for every 2 seats inside, correct?
Correct.
And the plans show in the Starbucks design 54 seats,
Correct.
i.e. a need of 27, correct?
There are 40 inside and 14 exterior seats.
Okay, so that's the next point I was going to. Of the 54 seats, 14 of them are outside. All right, now that makes them seasonal.
It does.
All right, if you only looked at the 40, you'd need 20 spaces, and we would have much more than we need.
Correct.
Correct, well under the 72.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, 72 would come down as a requirement. So, now, if Starbucks was willing to take away 4 of the outdoor seats, would we then comply in the parking requirement for the uses in this effective easterly end of the site?
We would.
We would, okay. All right, so if we needed more parking, we could also reduce more of those outdoor seats if that becomes an issue for the board for some reason?
For zoning purposes.
Yes, but right now, I can say to the board that you will hear from the Starbucks rep that we can reduce the outdoor parking by 4 seats. Or excuse me, the outdoor demand of seating by 4 seats, which then makes the effective parking compliant, consistent with the uses that are there. All right. Yeah, sure.
Because I have to write the resolution.
Yeah, well, you're going to have to listen to the tape, Mr. Becerra. There's no way around it.
How many total spaces on the entire site?
170.
Okay, so when you broke down the 70 effective, et cetera, they're totally separate analyses.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So we wanted to show that on a site-wide basis, I think Mr. Ken Tate also came down in his report that we needed 112.
Right.
With the Acura, you take out the 40 for the Acura, and it left, I think, 72 for our effective end. I'm not sure exactly what I should call it. Our use area, perhaps the way to refer to it. And if I say that, I'm talking about the 2 buildings on the easterly end and the associated parking with them that is separate and apart from the Acura dealership. And which, by the way, when you approve the...
Variance, correct? Parking? I thought they met the parking.
Well, it's for Mr. Duesenberg. Do you meet the parking requirements if you looked at it overall, without breaking down or bifurcating?
Yes.
You meet the parking.
For the entire lot,
Right.
there are 170 spaces, and we had 190, which was a typo, was an error on your report, Mr. Kente. When we get to that, it is 170. It was shown on the plans. That's the correct number. The need for all the uses added up is 112, and I'm taking this by memory right out of Mr. Ken Tate's report, and 40 of that was from the Acura dealership. So we had a need of just our use area for the uses proposed of 72.
Well, this is why we're not being asked to give you a variance.
No,
By
no.
our planner or by the engineer for
No,
parking.
no, but
I know you're
here's
trying
why.
to give us a comfort level
No,
here,
but here's
but
why.
you're also confusing me a little
Okay,
bit. Go
but
ahead.
here's why it's important and why we're going through this, Mr. Ryan. The conditional uses require that your parking is compliant. So if I'm asking you to look at the easterly end of the site as a discrete usage unit, I then have to be able to show to you that the parking can be compliant. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you for some relief on parking. And I'm trying to show you that we don't need it. The numbers work based on the uses. And in fact, we come in with less of a demand than the count of parking spaces that we provide.
Well,
By giving up those 4 seats.
At the risk of maybe being premature here, when I was going through this application, we keep bouncing back and forth whether this is one piece of property or multiple lots.
Yeah.
And that seems, even in your opening remarks.
It's absolutely true. It is confusing, all right? Because the law says we have to look at the lot as a lot.
Yeah.
And the law says we have to consider all things together. And in the sense, you could be saying to me tonight, well, you need a 15-foot buffer all down the rear properties of the Claremont houses that butt up against the Acura dealership. Okay? That's, in a sense, you could say that, except for the fact that you already approved site plans for the Acura dealership that allowed those variances to exist. See, so because of the way applications have been handled historically, this site is very unique. And I'm trying to deliver it to you showing that it works in either perspective, either in an analysis as an entire lot or as a more practical analysis, looking at the functional use area on the easterly end and saying, is this going to work? Because that's really, at the end of the day, what's important. Is this going to work? Is the Starbucks coming in here as a substituted use, even though it's permitted? You know, you have a right to look at it. Don't forget, we're asking for a minor site plan review. We are doing some changes to the site plan, as you'll hear in a few minutes. We're taking down the driving canopy, the drive-through canopy that was there for the bank. So you have every right to look at those issues. I'm just trying to show you enough facts so you can look at this from different perspectives and still feel comfortable about an approval. Okay?
Thank you.
So you're absolutely right to be confused. But it's taken me a long time to get to my distillation of how I think this whole site should be viewed for this application. All right?
Appreciate you clarifying that.
All right. So I think we've kind of beaten on parking just a little bit, and maybe it was a little out of turn in terms of some of the things. But why don't we just keep pecking away at the 15-foot residential buffer issue? All right? First of all,
Can we pause for just a second? I'm sorry, I have a
Absolutely.
question about parking. So this unoccupied space now,
yeah.
what happened if that ever got to be a restaurant?
That, well, first of all, you'd have to have an application here because of change of use. So then you'd look at it and you'd say, okay, you got 27 or maybe less, maybe only 25 a need from Starbucks. You got Famous Ray's, which could convert to something else by then. Somebody would have to come in and look at it. Right now, it was used as what was considered office space for the parking calculation. So that's a problem the landlord would have to deal with in trying to find a new tenant for that space. And that one's been empty for a while now too. So we're hopeful that this traffic signal is going to make a lot of people look differently on this site. Right.
So just so these 72 spaces that are outlined here, there's no interaction between the Acura dealer and the
No,
parked
in
cars?
fact, that's why I made the upfront point that gate is locked. That's really for occasional access when they need to get a big truck back there or something else like that. But effectively, it's a separate site. And they've come before you as a separate site without any mention of what's going on the easterly end of the property. It's pretty interesting to read those old resolutions. But it's totally understandable in how that all evolved, because this has been a mixed-use property for 50-plus years. Okay, I don't want to beat that up anymore. Pre-existing 15-foot residential buffers, we don't have them, do we?
We don't have, no.
All right. So, as pointed out, when we get the Environmental Commission report, there is just one residential property that is really impacted by this site. Will you point it out to the board?
Right here on Claremont is the first property adjacent to the westerly property line. There's an existing 5-foot buffer currently that's planted, curved, it has a guardrail against it as well. There's also a fence on the residential side that we just replaced along the...
Okay, excuse me. I think you need the microphone. All right, so let's make sure it's on. You probably can take it off the stand if you want to and hold it, or you can just stand next to it. But when I can't hear you, then I know we're in trouble.
So there's...
Okay, is it on?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
So there's an existing, or it's a required 15-foot buffer adjacent to residential properties. The residential property is located on Claremont, directly adjacent to the westerly property line. Currently, there's an existing 5-foot buffer that exists adjacent to that property. We're not proposing to change that.
All right, now, that buffer has a solid fence, 6 foot high?
There's a solid fence, 6 foot high. It was just replaced
Okay, it was just replaced by the applicant
by the applicant, yes.
in conjunction with the homeowner's consent,
Correct,
at the homeowner's request, in fact.
correct.
Okay, and the homeowner representative, Ms. Chen, is in the audience this evening. We took the opportunity after the last meeting to engage her and to find out what was necessary, and we replaced the fence. So that's been done. If the board wants us to knock it down to do something else, well, we'll do it, but we wouldn't like that. It was a pretty expensive fence. But let's talk more about it. The fence is right on the neighbor's side of that buffer, correct?
Correct,
So
yes.
there's no room to do anything on the neighbor's side any more than have a fence there viewed from the neighbor.
There isn't. The neighbor's driveway is directly up against the fence.
Okay,
Directly up against the
so
property.
on the neighbor's side of the fence, it goes driveway and then right back to a garage, which is also right next to, adjacent to the sideline?
Correct,
Okay. And then the fence continues beyond the garage all the way back to the corner?
correct.
All right. Now let's talk about the shrubbery that's there. All right. What's it like?
It was just cleaned up, so there's definitely sparse shrubbery, but the shrubs that are there are tall, and they do provide buffering for the property owner. The bottoms are a little sparse, so I think we're looking to replant some.
Okay, so when we talk about some landscaping mitigation later,
Yep,
this area would be included in infill shrubbery,
correct,
all right? And it already has irrigation, does it not?
correct, yes.
All right. Now, and we would do that at the, in conjunction, if the board so approved, with the township engineer.
Yep, we would add it to the plans as a condition of approval.
All right. So the idea there would be to infill what exists
Mhm.
because it's already paved. Now, let's talk about one structure there that we haven't talked about. There's a huge guardrail the whole length of that buffer, is there not?
There is, yes,
And is the
correct.
purpose of that guardrail to protect that homeowner from any truck, car, or anything that comes off our site and might head towards the sideline?
It is, it's for safety purposes.
And is this in good repair?
It's in good repair, yes.
Okay, so it's a solid highway-type
Metal
guardrail.
correct.
All right. Expensive to move?
Yes, it would be pretty pricey.
But it can have some shrubbery around it and some mitigation for aesthetic reasons?
It can, yes.
All right. So since we're talking about the buffer, the Environmental Commission would like to have that widened and a rain garden put in and widened to 15 feet to comply with the ordinance. Why can't we do that?
Well, what's critical for the Starbucks and the fact that there's multiple retail uses on the site is two-way circulation around the Starbucks, also around, basically around the whole building. It provides good circulation. It also prevents vehicles from getting stuck at a dead end or having to traverse onto the roadway if they don't find a parking space. So we would like to maintain the driveway width for two-way circulation. We're also adding parking along that property line, along this curb line, so we could bring up the parking standard to meet Starbucks demand. Also, that additional width allows for a fire truck to be able to circulate around the back of the building. If we were to reduce it to a one-way and increase that buffer, we wouldn't be able to get emergency vehicles or a fire truck around the back of that building.
Assuming a fire truck would want to go on the site to begin with.
Assume, yeah, but they right now have access to the building from Claremont and Pompton, and if they did for some reason need access to the back of the building, say they had to get back to the DCH Acura dealership or one of those uses, they could use this driveway and be able to circulate freely.
Okay, so right now, let me get this clear. The back of that area, because that was the drive-through area, is roughly 3 lanes wide.
Correct.
I mean, in layman's terms. So we're looking to take one of them to put in the parallel parking, 5 spaces, and then leave the rest of the space available for 2-lane traffic.
Correct.
Okay. The Environmental Commission has recommended making that one-way in towards the center of the site. So would that then effectively mean somebody coming around the building in a clockwise fashion would then run into two signs that say one-way, do not enter?
Yes, if it was clockwise, you'd get stuck here, you wouldn't be able to make the right turn, so you'd be stuck at a dead end right there. You'd have to do a three-way turn. It wouldn't be good, wouldn't work for circulation.
Okay, so two-way circulation is a real important thing for this site.
It is, yes.
Okay, all right, now, let's talk about open space. The impervious coverage on the plan for the overall lot is, in the round numbers, about 89%, correct?
Correct.
All right, so reverse is, we've got 11% open space.
Yes, I think the actual number was 10.2.
You can give us the actual number.
10.2.
So we are then 9.8% short of having 20% open space, correct?
We are.
Okay, and that's a pre-existing condition.
It is.
We're not adding to, well, we'll talk about that, but substantially, we're not adding to impervious.
We're not.
We're not changing drainage at all, except for moving a pipe, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yep.
All right. We're removing the canopy.
Yep.
And we do have some places where we're going to seize maybe for some shrubs and some greenery that you'll talk about in a few minutes on landscaping.
Yep.
Okay. So we are using the existing sanitary sewer?
Yeah, all existing utilities will remain. The difference or the demand difference between a bank and the Starbucks is minor. Sanitary, storm, electric, water, they don't require any increase in lateral sizes, and they don't have any negative impacts on the mains in the street. So everything is de minimis.
Okay, let's talk then about what you're changing. Let's let the board know exactly what's going to get changed. Okay? So, you want to sit back down?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think we need the board anymore. You can. Yeah, why don't you do that first? Put it up there so we can get to it next.
So to avoid confusion, the next.
Maybe you want to stay up there. Stay up there, and then you can point to the things, and I'll tick off what we're doing.
Sure. The next exhibit is a site plan set. Just for clarity, the aerial is oriented with true north. The site plan set was prepared with Compton Ave to the south of the plan. So what you're going to be looking at now is just has a slightly different orientation from what's up here.
Now, this is from the plan set, so there's no need to mark it, correct?
Yep. From the plan set, it is sheet SP4, and it's dated 4/9/2024.
Okay, so first thing we're going to do, we're going to remove the drive-through, correct? You show the board where that is.
The drive-through was here, it's no longer going to be there.
Okay, we're going to remove the flagpole.
Yep.
Unless somebody in the audience says that an approval is absolutely assured if we keep the flagpole. No, I don't hear that happening. So, just a mild attempt at humor, it's getting late.
We didn't make any. Just a light mood.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to remove the flagpole. Now, on the south end of the building, what are you doing?
There's an existing door on the south end of the building that has stairway access into the building. We're changing that to ramp access, which will be ADA compliant. It'll also allow for loading through that ramp to a doorway, so you can bring a hand truck up that ramp and into the building.
All right, let me be clear about it. So there's an existing door there, but it's down 2 steps or 3, right?
Yep.
Okay, so what you're going to do is make a ramp so it comes right up to the level of the door.
Correct.
So it's also an ADA compliant entrance.
Yes.
And also will allow for deliveries to ramp up, and that door will access both the interior customer space as well as the back workspace for Starbucks.
It has 2 doors in. One goes to the customer space and one goes to the back area for Starbucks.
Okay. We're showing a loading area in the back for a truck to park, correct?
Correct.
Will you tell the board the little error we discovered with respect to that?
We thought we were going to add a service entrance in the back. That service entrance is not being added. So this loading area is going to be relocated to the side here. And Starbucks does do loading, which they'll provide testimony about later on off hours. So they may end up loading from the front when there's no customers there, or they may load from the side, but this loading area in the back is no longer going to be.
All right, and now it was there because we thought there was going to be an entrance back there, and there is no entrance.
There's no entrance.
Okay, so that's got to be relocated. All right, now, the installation of the ramp does what to the storm drain?
It goes directly over an existing storm drain, so there's going to be a minor relocation of a storm drain just to kick it out away from the building, and it's going to connect right back into where it currently discharges to.
So it doesn't affect the increase in drainage, it doesn't add impervious, it's just moving the pipe so it's not under the ramp?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I'm sure people would be happy to hear, what are the plans for resurfacing and restriping?
Yep, so the applicant is proposing to restripe this upper lot in the areas of the current application.
Resurface?
Resurface, yes.
Resurface
Sorry,
and restripe?
And restripe, yes.
Okay. So that solves a lot of problems. Resurfacing and restriping. Okay?
Could you, future revisions of the plan develop that area?
Yep, we will, yes.
Yep. Okay. Around the site, there are needs for fence, rail, walls to be...
Correct. So there are there's a wall along the frontage of Pompton Avenue with a railing. It's currently in disrepair. The plans will be updated if approved as for resolution compliance, showing sections to be repaired. It will be brought up to like new condition.
So there's wall, there's fencing. Now also, isn't there sidewalk in need of repair or replacement?
There was a comment in the engineer's letter about sidewalk that is
uneven.
Uneven, yeah. So there is a note currently on the plan saying that sidewalk or sidewalk that needs to be replaced will be replaced.
Okay, so as we said earlier, you're going to talk about landscaping in a couple of minutes. All right. We're also reconstructing the dumpster enclosure, are we not?
We are.
All right, and what's the size of that going to be?
The size of the dumpster is, let me see. It's 19 feet wide by 10 feet deep.
And 7 feet high?
And 7 feet high, yeah.
It's
The
enclosed.
enclosure is, yeah.
All right. Now, where's that going to be?
That is going to be right in the location of the existing dumpster that exists on the site.
All right. Now, there may be a need to move that dumpster and put the full discrete Starbucks enclosure where you just pointed. Okay?
Correct, yes.
If that becomes a need between the owner and Starbucks, and that it can't be a shared dumpster, can the existing dumpster be relocated so that we then have two dumpster areas?
It can. We see opportunities to move that dumpster, either shift this one over to the right and keep the existing dumpster where it is, or we may relocate it across the drive aisle closer to the Ray's Pizza building.
Are you confident that that is a detail that can be worked out with the township engineer, with Mr. Ken Tate?
Yep.
All right. And then obviously, we're looking to add an oversized sign on the north facade. Will you tell the board where that is?
It's, the building mounted sign is this dark line.
No, it's not that one. It's the north facade facing Claremont,
Okay,
right there.
Yeah, building
Okay.
mounted sign right there.
Okay, and then there's a pylon sign proposed, and will you point to the board where that sign is
Sure. The
proposed?
pylon sign is right behind the signal equipment. It's closer to the curb line for the Starbucks at the corner.
Okay. Staying in our planned order, let's talk about utilities. Again, you just briefly highlighted sanitary sewer, 2 bathrooms existing, 2 bathrooms proposed.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, clearly, everybody knows that there are standards of gallonage for different types of use, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so did you do a calculation on what the GPD was for the bank?
We did, so the GPD for the bank is 344. For the restaurant, it's going to increase to 810. It's a very de minimis increase in sanitary sewer. We don't require any outside approvals. It won't have an impact on the sanitary line in the street. It's
Okay,
very
so let's put that into perspective. So you're increasing it by 466 gallons a day is the standard for restaurant use. Okay, all right, it's the standard. I'm not, well, okay, I won't comment. So that's roughly 1.5 homes.
Correct.
Okay, the average residential dwelling's 350 a day?
Approximately, yes.
All right, so between, well, the Starbucks use is like 2 houses, a little over 2 houses. 2.5 houses?
Correct, 2.5, 3
Okay,
houses.
so that's, in your view, de minimis?
It's de minimis.
Okay.
It's not going to have any impact.
And as far as you're concerned, does it have any meaningful impact on downstream sanitary sewer?
It doesn't have any impact.
In your opinion, does the downstream sanitary sewer adequately handle its needs as far as this site is concerned?
Yep, we're not unaware of any problems with the existing sanitary sewer.
In operating under normal conditions?
Correct.
Okay. Stormwater drainage. We're not changing any grades, we're not adding any additional runoff, we're not changing the drainage.
Yep, runoff from the site is the same, drainage from the site is the same, no changes are required.
Okay. Is there any need to do any kind of downstream analysis as to capacity?
Nope, we're not changing anything, so.
All right. Water service, pressure adequate?
It's our understanding that pressure is adequate. Speaking to the old engineer for the town, there was a hydrant flow test at the dealership a while back, and there's plenty of pressure for the Acura down there, down at the corner. We're unaware of any issues there are for the current building.
Okay, let's talk about site lighting. All right. The existing fixtures are going to remain, except they're all going to be relamped.
Yep, they're going to be relamped. There's going to be a new fixture added to the back of the building to help light the back of the back drive aisle. But all existing lighting is to remain just relamping.
Okay, so all these new fixtures, I assume they're LEDs now?
Yep, all LEDs.
Okay, and they're all downward pointing?
Correct.
And they're all shielded in terms of their light spillage in terms of?
Uplight, yes.
Okay, any problem with spillage over into the residential area?
Nope.
Will the existing conditions be improved by the installation of the new lights?
It will.
All right. Now, there was a question about the Kelvin, the color, if you will, of the light.
Temperature.
The proposal is 4,000 K, correct?
Correct.
That's a fairly white light, is it not?
It is. There's wider. It goes up to 5,000, 5,500, but 4,000 is typical for a retail use.
Okay, and for most people, for a frame of reference, an average yellow light household light bulb is roughly 2,700?
2,700, 3,000 K.
Okay,
yeah.
so there's a recommendation that the 4,000 K light bulbs be reduced to 3,000 so that they're a little warmer, if you will, and friendlier to adjacent properties, including the residential next door and the residential across the street.
Correct.
Okay, do you see any reason why the applicant could not do that?
I mean, I am more comfortable with it being 4,000 K. It's for safety reasons. I think it's better to have it. It's more typical for a retail use. The lights will be on timers, so they'll go off at nighttime hours. So I would recommend 4,000 K, but if the board insists they want 3,000, I have no issue with changing it. But I prefer 4,000. I think that belongs on the site.
Okay, let's talk about the pylon sign.
Sure.
Okay. You pointed out to the board where it's located, and that's going to be near one of the signal posts?
It is.
Okay. will you tell the relativity there? It's inboard from it, correct? It's interior
It's
from the,
interior to the site. We need a 10-foot separation between the sign and the signal post. So we had to move it onto the site towards the curb line of the parking spaces on the site.
okay, let's give the board some relativity. All right, the first floor elevation of the Starbucks building is how many feet below the grade on Pompton Avenue at the curb line?
Approximately 5 feet below.
Okay, how far is the building set back from the curb line?
It's set back approximately 50 feet.
All right, so the existing building is lower than Pompton Avenue and set back.
Correct.
Correct. Now, as you come south on Pompton Avenue, just before the Claremont intersection, what is located on the side of the road? What structures are there? And is there anything that would interfere with seeing the building?
Can I pull up?
Sure.
Bring up
Pull it up.
Original exhibit, the first exhibit, which was A1. It was marked A1.
Can everybody hear him okay, or does he need to hold the mic?
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, let's make sure we get a good record.
Okay, so there's an existing office building on the north side of Claremont Avenue. So for vehicles traveling south, it's very difficult to see the existing bank building or the proposed Starbucks building, because the Starbucks building is set back 50 feet from the curb line. Also, there's an additional lane. So the lanes for Pompton north of Claremont are set back another 10 feet away from the Starbucks. So you have about 60 feet of setback from the curb line to the Starbucks building. So if there's only signage on the building, someone traveling south on Pompton will not be able to see that signage in time to change 2 lanes over to get to the Starbucks.
And would they be able to see it in time to make a right on Claremont and then a left into the site?
Definitely not.
All right. So the sign would effectively cure that problem, wouldn't it?
It would increase sight distance for vehicles traveling southbound to about 500 feet back. So you'll be able to see that sign when you're traveling from the left lane. You'll be able to see it about 500 feet back, and you'll have enough time to change lanes, move over to get into that, to make a right on Claremont or to get into the parking lot.
All right. Let me ask you this, not to throw away one of my needs, but if in fact the pylon sign were approved because the building doesn't get seen until the last minute, would the building variance for a 5-foot sign be needed if you have a pylon sign? In other words, could we put in a 4-foot sign on the building, avoid that variance if the pylon sign was there giving people adequate notice?
Yep, I suppose so, yes.
All right, because the 5-foot sign on the building without a pylon sign is the only sign they'll see.
Yep.
All right, but if the pylon's there, we don't need the building sign larger, do we?
We don't, no.
All right. Now, let's talk a little bit about why it should be 25 feet high. All right, now, the 25 feet includes the top 6 feet of the sign itself, right?
It does.
Now, that's a Starbucks branding sign.
Yep.
All right, now the designs are in the package in color. It's been submitted to the board, correct?
Yep, it came from their national branding.
All right, now, let's talk again about elevation. So the base of that sign is how many feet below the grade at the curb of Pompton Avenue?
It's approximately 2.5 feet lower than the grade at that corner. There's a steep slope down this lawn area at that corner.
All right, so effectively, we're asking for a 22.5-foot sign.
Correct.
All right, because it's depressed on the site by 2.5 feet.
Correct.
Okay, so it's a little lower than what it sounds like. Now, give us, is there any topographical issue on Pompton Avenue, grade or geometry of the road itself, that impacts on the height of our sign?
There's a hump in the road, so there's a high point in Pompton right around the office building. So someone 500 feet back is at a lower elevation than that they would be at this hump or even at the corner here. So if they're traveling, in order to see the sign, they're going to see the sign at a lower height than that 25 feet.
Right, because the hump is in the way.
Correct.
All right, so as you approach the emergency care building where that hump is, that you were just pointing at.
Yep.
Now the sign starts to loom higher and larger.
Correct.
Right, but it's given adequate sight distance for someone to either turn into Claremont, left into the site, or turn off of Pompton directly into the lot.
Correct.
All right. Now, let's talk about the opposite direction. All right. If you're sitting down at the intersection of Bloomfield Avenue and Prospect, looking to cross Bloomfield Avenue northbound, where it becomes Pompton, if you're sitting right down there at the light, can you see the building?
You cannot see the building, no.
Could you see the pylon sign if it was up?
You can see the pylon sign right when you get into the intersection.
All right. So part of the reason you can't see the Starbucks building is because the famous Ray's building's in the way.
Correct.
So now as you cross Bloomfield Avenue, you're coming up the hill and to the left, correct?
Correct.
All right. So at that point, you clearly could see the sign, and now you're starting to see the building, correct?
Correct.
All right. So once again, from that direction, the sign makes a difference in safety and the ability to know where this business is located?
Correct. There's 2 lanes, so you have time to move over. It definitely makes it apparent that it's a
Okay,
Starbucks.
now I don't want to steal from the traffic engineer, but when that light is installed, people will be able to not only see the pylon sign, but at the new signal, they'll be able to make a left into Claremont.
Yes.
Now, that light northbound will be 2 lanes wide, correct?
It will.
And it will have a left turn signal, left turn or through in the left lane.
Yep, the left lane will be left.
Okay, so if somebody wants to make a left turn, they're waiting, cars behind it have to wait. But when the signal is correct, they'll be able to have an arrow to go left onto Claremont.
They will, yes.
And into the site. So the signal will make it safer, will it not?
It will.
Okay. Do you have anything to add about the pylon sign?
I do not, no.
Do you see any benefit to lower it? Or at some point, does it become ineffective?
It eventually becomes ineffective because of the hump, but I think 25 feet is their typical sign, so that's what we're proposing. With it being in a hole, I think the extra height helps visibility.
All right.
Can I just clarify? Running out of batteries.
Can I just clarify, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but if you're traveling north and you take the big turn,
yep,
can you get into the first
You cannot.
ingress?
There's a no left turn sign that is on the side of it, so that will remain. You still cannot make a left into that parking lot.
Okay, so
there's only a left turn at Claremont to get in.
All right, let's talk about, I think you're referring to the northern lot and the Pompton Avenue in-out entrance, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Correct.
right, just before, if you're coming southbound, just before the famous Ray's entrance. Okay.
Yes.
That is a right turn in only and a right turn out only, correct?
Correct.
And there's existing signage to that effect, correct?
Correct.
All right, it's a little tough to see because we're looking across 4 lanes of traffic, but that's the way it's currently restricted.
Yep, there's an existing no left turn sign, like I was mentioning, for vehicles coming into the site. There's also a no left turn sign across the way for vehicles exiting the parking lot.
Okay, the lower lot on the south side of Famous Ray's.
Yep.
All right, that is currently unrestricted in terms of right turn. There's no signage there, is there?
There is no signage, but there is a divider in the middle of the road.
Okay, so effectively, the applicant would have no trouble with having a right turn only sign there to enhance that fact, because you can't make a left physically. If you tried to, you'd run into the island, correct?
Yep.
All right, so we would agree to the installation of a right turn only sign on that exit as well, correct?
Correct.
All right, I don't think we're showing it on our plan presently, though.
Yeah, I don't think it's really needed because it's 4 lanes of traffic. And it's nobody in their right mind would try and make a left.
Well,
and
okay, but there are a few of those left.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, did that answer your question? Okay. Let's talk about the Boswell Engineering Report. I think maybe you want to sit down for this?
Sure.
Okay. We have 3 reports that have been given to us, and correct me if I'm missing them, but we have one Boswell report which was relating to the engineering issues. We have a second Boswell report that related to the traffic issues, and then the only other report I received or comments was on the Environmental Commission. So we've inferred from that, and your secretary has affirmed it, that if we don't have other reports, it means that you received no comment from OEM, from fire, or from police. Now, am I correct that there are no comments from anybody else? Okay, so I think that's kind of important.
It is important, and I just wanted to clarify with our people over here. In view of all the traffic issues here, was the police chief asked to comment on this particular plan? Okay, and he had no comments. And so we infer no comment means they had no objection to anything that was proposed. Council, is that a fair assumption?
That's absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and in fact, our traffic guy had a conversation with the chief that we'll talk about in a few minutes, if we get that far.
Well, with all due respect, I mean, you're going to give us your side of the...
Oh, yeah, no question.
And I don't want to say I'm going to call Chief Kieran here to verify everything that you're
No.
saying that,
That's all right.
that you discussed with him.
We're not going to go, we're not going to,
But if we need to, we will.
and we won't seriously impinge on the hearsay rule. Okay. All right, so,
And a point of clarification, and I'm actually going to help you with this because I know, I know they've been looking for a traffic light there for years. Just for the public edification, I was on the Verona Town Council for 10 years, okay? I was notified step by step of all of the application procedures for the traffic light well before this Starbucks application. So I know there was a lot of back and forth, regarding that. And I do know the town was consulted, at every step along the way, even though we had the state, the county, and I believe also the town. We had 3 bureaucratic entities involved in our conversation.
we'll have some testimony on that, but I will tell you that the town actually adopted an ordinance to endorse the traffic light application. We had to have those ordinances done by both the municipality.
And I probably voted yes on it, but I mean, I'm sure you're going to tell me that. But go ahead.
And the county on, to go to the DOT and get the warrants that were necessary to start that project, and that has been started, which you'll hear about in a few minutes.
But I don't want people to get confused between this application and the traffic light.
Well,
sort of back to my point on the lot versus
well, you're right, and that's why in my opening remarks, I made it clear the light is a separate project.
Right.
Yes, it impacts on this
It influences our
analysis.
decision, but we can't do anything about the light. I
Correct,
just wanted to make that clear to the public.
correct,
The light is a done deal, correct?
correct,
Okay, thank you.
correct, and you're going to hear about that from the traffic consultant, just to confirm that with the sworn testimony. Okay, we're looking now at the Boswell Engineering Review Letter of May 24th, if any of you should care to follow along. The first couple pages are summary of documents and things examined. On page 2, we get to a description of the application, which certainly doesn't require any comment and is totally accurate. On page 3, again, some more data, observations, a variance summary, and you'll notice that the variance summary, there are a slew of pre-existing conditions on this site, all of which have an E next to them that say existing nonconformity, and the only new ones that are addressed with the V deal with the signs. All right, so let's get to page 4 if we can, and I'm just going to tick through them. In some cases, which witness will deal with which number. All right, so 10, 11, 12, and 13 all deal with the architecture. Those will be Mr. Cruz for Starbucks. He'll talk about that. Site plan, 14, Mr. Jar, our traffic consultant, will talk about that. Number 15, Mr. Rapp, you're on. The applicant will provide testimony about the ramp on the side of the building. You've already stated that it is ADA compliant, right?
Correct.
And it shows a railing on the architectural renderings that needs to be identified and labeled on your site plan. You'll comply with that?
I will, we will.
Okay. 16, and please stop me if somebody has a question or wants us to respond in more detail, but I'll go through these things and feel free to interrupt me.
So I'm sorry, so that side ramp is now also your service entrance, yes?
It's the delivery entrance as well as ADA compliant, as is the front entrance. Okay, so we have two ADA entrances. All right. 16, construction details. Okay, wait a minute. Details for the stairs and the bollards, location proposed stairs should be shown and labeled. Well, that's an erroneous detail, so that detail is going to be removed.
It will be removed from the plans.
Okay. 17 is Starbucks. Dealing with the flagpole, but I've already let the cat out of the bag that the flagpole will be removed. Mr. Rapp, number 18 for you. It's dealing with areas of the lot are cracked and need of repair. We've already indicated that we are going to resurface and restripe the upper section of the parking lot, and we'll do that to the satisfaction of the township engineer. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. 19, the applicant should provide testimony regarding how pedestrians will travel safely through the parking lot and site. Do you have any comments about that, Mr. Rapp?
Typical of most Starbucks, they're going to walk from their cars through the parking lot to the building. Nothing's changing, similar to the bank, exact same circulation.
Okay, do you see any opportunities for a gore-striped crosswalk or anything like that, or does it just not apply to this kind of a site?
Typically, we wouldn't show it. I don't think it's necessary.
All right. Even if we were to show it, do you think people would follow it?
I don't think so. People are going to park in their cars and walk just whatever path they walk to.
Okay. All right, 20 deals with the refuse recycling area. Mr. Cruz is going to talk about A. Mr. Rapp, B, construction detail will be provided for the refuse recycling area. Nothing was submitted. You will provide that, correct?
We will.
All right, and you've described it, but you'll provide the detail and Mr. Kentate's satisfaction.
Yep.
Okay. C is will location of the refuse recycle area obstruct the normal traffic flow?
It will not. There are going to be parallel parking spaces along that curb line as well.
Okay. The recommendation from Mr. Kentate is the curb be installed from the existing inlet to the planters so surface water runoff does not flow to the adjacent property. Is the adjacent property referred to there the residential next door?
It is.
Okay, so the recommendation is that the curbing be installed there to keep water on the site, correct?
Yep, we're going to add that to our.
Okay, and you will agree to that. Okay, now that flies in the face of the recommendation of the Environmental Commission to have the curbing either depressed or gapped so the water can flow into the buffer area, correct?
Correct.
All right, so in your opinion, which is better?
We'd like to cut it off and
Keep it on site.
So we can maintain two-way circulation.
So you agree with Mr. Kentate that it should be solid curbing,
Yes.
keeping water where it belongs on this site?
Correct, yeah, the residential property at that location is a little bit higher than the driveway. However, to avoid erosion, I think curbing should be added.
Okay, so you'll agree with that?
Yes.
All right, 21, the existing sidewalk along Pompton, settled low curb. All right, so you've already testified that you're going to redo and replace any curbing as required.
Sidewalk, yes.
And subject to the approval of Mr. Kentate, right?
Yes.
All right. 22, applicant will provide testimony with regard to the access and turning movements for emergency vehicles. All right. You haven't submitted any templates, have you?
We have it.
All right, do you feel a need to do that?
I don't.
Okay, do you believe that there's adequate turning radius for emergency vehicles? First, let's start with the small ones. Ambulances?
Ambulance, no problem. I did run a turning template for a fire truck, and we can circulate around the back with the two-way access.
Okay, but as a practical matter, do you think the fire department is going to fight the fire
I don't.
at this location with vehicles brought on site?
I don't think so. No.
So what will they do?
They'll fight it from the adjacent roadways, Pompton, Claremont.
All right, so the only need for a fire vehicle really to get onto this site would be to maybe break through the locked gate to access a fire in the back of the Acura dealership?
Correct.
For emergency purposes?
Yes.
Okay, so would there be any problem with a fire truck accessing through that gate to get to the Acura side of the fence?
There would be no problem.
Okay, so we feel that that responds to that question. 23, how's the applicant going to handle snow plowing operations?
That's the landlord, but I believe they truck the snow off. There's no room to store it, so they truck the snow off.
Okay, so that your answer is that there's no place to push it without losing parking, and they have to truck it?
Yep.
All right, and that happens after a certain amount of snowfall, I assume?
Yes.
Okay, what, more than 2 inches?
I assume, yes.
Okay. 24, fire zone, no parking zones are all subject to fire department prevention bureaus approval. You'll comply with that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, 25, applicant aware of the responsibility to repair any damaged improvements as a result of your construction activities. Of course, you'll comply with that.
Yep, we'll add a note to the plan for that.
Okay, 26, Mr. Jar will address the traffic consultant. 27, Bloomfield is under the jurisdiction of Essex County, Bloomfield Avenue. We need to obtain approval from Essex County Planning Board. I will remind the board that we've submitted a letter of no interest from the Essex County Planning Board. It's part of your file. It was submitted. And it's basically because there's no change in any curb cuts. They don't want to do it. But I will note that Essex County was materially involved, as you'll hear from Mr. Jar, in the design of the traffic signal and everything that was going on in front of the site. So they clearly, Mr. Antonio is well aware of what's going on. He's the one who signed the letter of no interest. So we're good with the county. All right, 28, they want an as-built survey, which is a good idea. When the project's done, do an as-built survey. We'll comply with that, will we not?
We will.
29, retaining walls, fence along Pompton is damaged. We've already testified you're going to replace that. You'll comply, correct?
Correct.
30 is you're proposing to construct a wall along the proposed ramp to the south of the building with an exposed height of 3.75 feet. You need to provide them with a construction detail. You'll comply?
We will. That detail will be part of the building permit submission since it's attached to the building.
All right. 31, retaining walls greater than 3 feet, exposed height require wall stability calculations. So if you have any retaining walls greater than 3 feet that you're putting in, you'll comply with the stability tests and calculations?
We will.
Okay, off-street parking, loading spaces, item 32. This is the section I was referring to earlier where Mr. Tate had summarized those parking space issues. Do you have any comment on them at this point?
Nope.
Okay, so 33, we're proposing 199 parking spaces. That's where the error was I referred to early. That number should be 170. 170 is correct. And we're proposing how many ADA spaces?
We currently show 1 in front of the Starbucks and total of 2 for the retail uses. For 70 parking spaces, which we're proposing, you need 3 ADA spaces. So we are going to update our plans to modify the ADA spaces in front of the Starbucks to be 2 instead of 1. So we'll have the total of 3 that's required for that area.
So that will be a minor change. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Tate asked for 6.
I have to check if there's the whole site.
Excuse me?
It may be the whole site.
6 is the whole site, yes.
So if you add an ADA spot, will you lose any of the regular parking spaces?
We will not, we're just going to move the striping to be between two, yes.
So the count remains the same?
Yes.
All right, we're at 70 right now, but we're 72 required. All right, so we're providing 70, but we can reduce the requirement to 70 from 72 by giving up the 4 seats outdoors, right? So we have 70 spaces, 70 required.
Yes.
And 3 of those will be
So
ADA.
ADA is required based on the number that's actually installed. So for 70 spaces, we're going to provide the 3 that are required.
Okay.
Do you need any van spaces?
Excuse me?
Do you need any van spaces?
We need 1 van space, and we show, in front of the Starbucks, there's currently 3 spaces. We've reduced that to 2 so that we can get that striping for the van. That striping is just going to move over so that it's in the middle of 2 spaces.
And you said, so 54 seats, and that's what determines the spaces, but what about employees?
That includes the employees, that's all part of it.
Yeah, when they create that standard, it assumes that the nature of the use and then the employees that are going to be associated with it, so. But they do it based on seat count. Yeah. And as I said, we're going to go on record to reduce 4 of the outdoor seats. All right. It makes everything work. All right, 33. Okay, we've just done that. Okay, 34, I went to 35. Oh, yeah, okay, we're at 35. Talk about the 5 new parallel spaces and proposed along the property line. You've described where they are. Will they affect the privacy of the adjacent residential dwelling?
I think they'll help. Instead of being a drive aisle, it'll be a parked car. So it'll keep cars from constantly passing the property while driving. So it'll just allow cars to park. I know we were looking into making that employee parking, trying to.
If I were to say to you that Starbucks would direct its employees to use those 5 spaces for employees parking, would that affect your answer?
Yeah, it would definitely help it even further.
Because the cars would have less movement?
Yep.
Okay.
It does, the parked cars provide a little bit of a buffer from the actual drive lane, which is a good thing in my opinion.
All right, so as you come in from Claremont, there's going to be a gore striped area that then kind of protects the start of the parallel parked cars.
Yes.
Correct.
It'll direct them out.
All right. Now, that's proposed to be gore striping. Could you recapture some green space there?
We could, if we wanted to curb that gore striped area and add landscaping back or a landscaped area, we can do that.
All right, so you could work that out with the
Yep.
With the engineer.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, while we're talking about recapturing some green space, on the upper lot, the entrance, the no right, or the right turn in, right turn out entrance. On the north edge of it is a sewer manhole, and it's got a rectangular area all around it that's gravel.
Yep.
Okay. Could that be landscaped?
It can be.
Okay, so we can recapture some green there.
Well, technically it's dirt,
Well, okay, it's open space,
but we could add landscaping.
Okay, so that's another place where you could recapture some there. And you've already indicated, yes, Mr.
What
Massaro.
was the first added green space, the gore striping you said?
Pull up the site plan, show them what we're talking about.
So we're adding gore striping entrance off Claremont, right, in order to direct cars out to the drive lane, so we can add these 5
parking spaces. We're adding this gore striping here. So we could actually redo the curving for this gore striping. We can make that green.
It adds to the buffer actually a little bit. It's not a lot, but it's something to try and mitigate.
There are also a few other opportunity areas for adding landscaping. John was just talking about this island here. Right now, it's just a dirt island with a manhole. We could add landscaping there.
There is a lot of existing landscaping around the current building. I mean,
Yeah, that's,
do you plan on just keeping that as is around the perimeter? I just drove by there today.
Yeah, there's a lot of good-looking
Yeah, no,
landscaping there.
Once again, I'm being nice here.
No.
I'm not trying to be critical.
I love softballs.
And I would like to see that being kept, so I'm asking you if you plan on keeping that.
Yes, yes. And in fact, you're planning on, with Mr. Ken Cate's assistance, infilling some gaps in that landscaping along the front of the building and enhancing it so that it's all uniformly beautiful.
yep, as needed, we'll work with Pete's office.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, I think we're at 36, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
All right, and that's going to be Mr. Cruz for Starbucks, talking about the loading space and how that's all going to work. ADA facilities, next topic, 37. Well, we've already talked about that, that will comply. And then on 38, the applicant will confirm, handicapped. Okay, 38, you've already confirmed that the ramp is ADA compliant and that the front entry will be ADA compliant?
Yep, we will reconstruct the front entry to be compliant. Yes.
Okay, utilities, you'll provide the testimony that the existing water, sewer, and gas service to the building. The location service shall be shown and labeled on the plan. Well, you haven't shown them and labeled them yet.
They're all existing to remain. We could show them, but yeah.
Okay, so they're existing, they're going to remain, but you will show them on the plan.
Yes.
Okay, so the answer to 41 is will comply, correct?
Correct.
Okay, 42, the applicant will provide testimony of water pressure. Well, we've already done that. You've said it's adequate. 43, dealt with the sewer system being adequate. You've already testified that it is. 44, existing services to be utilized will require a video inspection to confirm they're not clogged or damaged and are operating properly. The applicant should make any repairs that are required. All right, we're willing to comply with that, correct?
Correct.
But as to our site,
As for our site, the laterals from the building, we
okay,
will.
so we're not going off site with this?
We're not.
Okay. All right, so that was 46, 47.
No, that was 44.
Did I miss?
You missed 45.
Oh, darn. Thought I was going to get away with that.
still awake
45,
here.
no response required. 45, no response required. 46, no response required. All right. It's their statements from Mr. Cantatas to existing conditions. All right. So I can jump to 47, thank you. Recommendation is that existing drainage system be utilized and inspected and cleaned to ensure it's properly functioning. We'll comply with that?
We will on site.
As to our site only?
Yes.
Okay, all right. 48, confirm existing stormwater system is adequate downstream. We've already testified about that. 49, the final grading of the lot must ensure additional surface runoff does not flow or get trapped in any adjoining properties. You'll comply with that?
We will, yep.
But as a practical matter, do you envision any final grading that's going to be done other than that necessary to resurface the parking lot?
Yep, I mean, they're going to have to take care when they resurface that they direct it to the inlet.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, that it's graded property when you resurface it. Okay, all right.
Can I ask
Now-
a question about
Yeah,
that?
Absolutely.
Just in your opinion, on a more macro scale, Mount Prospect floods downstream, big time.
Okay.
Do you have any feedback, insight into any other mitigation techniques that you might be able to employ to remedy that a little bit?
I mean, I think that's a bigger problem than what we do to fix. It's Mount Prospect is.
Right.
Well,
I mean,
where
our ordinance
are
is
you-
that it has
where-
to comply
where
with
now-
what it is, but it doesn't necessarily fix the bigger
Yeah,
problem.
where are you,
On the other side, as you change from 23 to Mount Prospect.
okay, and you head up to that signal down in that area?
Yeah, that area
See the
is a
flush-
severely
Yeah.
downsloped
Does
area.
our water even go there?
It does. I mean,
Yeah.
it connects to the drainage system, but I don't know where the actual flooding
is.
starts. Like, I don't know where the water's coming from. So I think the amount that we're adding is.
Well, you're not adding
minor.
it, you're not adding anything.
Or that's running off from our property, very minor compared to what is going there totally. So that sounds like a bigger problem than what we're causing, or what we're adding.
What you're contributing. You're not adding. What you're contributing under existing conditions, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, that was 4850. You're not proposing any modifications to the existing lights other than what you've described, right?
Yep.
Okay, so really no further response is required for 5051. Construction details for light fixtures, this is where the issue came up of the 4,000K versus the 3,000K. The recommendation from Mr. Ken Kate is that the light color intensity be reduced because of the adjacent to residential dwellings. So we might want to ask Mr. Ken Tate's opinion about that. We have one adjacent house on Claremont. The whole site is well below any of the residential properties across the intersection in the condominium. So I don't see, it's a color issue.
Do they have to be consistent?
Could we do like 3,000K on the light fixtures that are right along that outside of the lot?
So we can do that.
Why don't we do that? That makes sense, so that because it is a little warmer light. Yeah, well, you can have more. I'd like help. Okay. As long as the application ends up as best as it can be, I don't care who contributes. All right. So, okay, so we were talking now. We also, I think I'm at 53. Oh, no. Well, 52 and 53 are both about lighting. You've testified about that. You've also testified the lighting now, because of the LED lighting, is more directed downward. Right. So there's less spillage. All right. Do you envision any of this intruding on the adjacent residential property?
I do not. It's all building mounted, and if you look at the templates that were shown on the plans, it ends before the curb line, so.
Okay. And you said the hours of site lighting are going to be reduced when the after hours?
Yep, their lighting's going to be on a timer.
Okay. And certainly they'll be reduced when Starbucks is closed.
Correct.
All right.
They'll be off.
All right. So, all right, 55, 54 and 55, actually, we're going to ask Mr. Cruz about for Starbucks, but 55 deals with the lighting over the seating area outside. Now, that's down lighting from an overhang of the building, correct?
Correct.
On the outside seating.
Yes.
So that light cannot be seen from across the street from those condominiums because it's below grade, it's lower, the building's lower in grade, and that lighting is down lighting. So the light fixtures can't be seen.
Can't be seen from the residence in the back.
Yeah, well, not the
But
back
it's-
either.
Yep.
All right, because the seating is in a notch of the building.
Yep,
So the building prevents that light from being seen from the residence next door.
correct. It's not open lighting, so it's just down lighting from the ceiling above.
Okay. 56, no response is required. 57, landscaping. All right, we did talk about this a lot. We will provide the planting area and buffers and try and seize any opportunities that we've outlined here this evening on a landscape plan that we would submit for approval to the township engineer. 58, existing foundation landscaping, also we've discussed that you're going to infill all of that landscaping that's there to enhance the stuff that will remain, the shrubbery that's there and attractive. All right, 59, tree removal. Are there any trees proposed to be removed on the site?
Nope.
Okay. 60, okay, just talks about applications. So no response is required for 60. On 61, are the signs, the directional signs, things like that, all in accordance with the township ordinance?
They are.
And if they're not, they will be made to comply?
If not, they will be made to comply, yes.
All right. No response is required for 62. Mr. Kincaid has just simply identified the signage. 63, pylon signs are not permitted, variance is required. Well, we certainly know that. And you've given testimony as to why it needs to be 25 feet high. So unless there are more questions about that, we can go on to 64. The Starbucks enter sign, the details need to be provided. We did not provide them. You will provide them.
You will add them, yes.
You'll comply with that. 65 deals with the analysis or some comments regarding the intensity or the lighting of the actual Starbucks sign. Mr. Cruz will talk about that. 66, no business sign will be illuminated between the hours of 11 and 6 a.m. unless the business is use is so advertised and open to the public. Well, we'll comply with all that. Hours of operation we'll get into in a couple of minutes, hopefully with Mr. Cruz. Oh. I just looked. Oh, okay.
We don't usually take any new testimony.
Yeah, I hear.
After 11.
Okay, I hear you. All right, we're just about done with this letter. All right, 65, Mr. Cruz will talk about. 66, Mr. Cruz will talk about. 67, no response is required. 68, we don't intend to move any soil quantities, but if there were to be, there's no soil movement in this application.
Very minor soil movement for the ramp. They're going to have to put a footing in, but very minor.
Okay, so you'll provide the quantities on the plan. Okay, so you'll comply with 68, 69, just announces the soil removal ordinance, no response required. 70 you'll comply with, which means you're going to maintain a soil erosion sediment control measures throughout the construction. And then 71, limits of disturbance don't exceed 5,000 square feet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, is the removal of and resurfacing, does that constitute a disturbance?
That does not, no.
No, okay. It would only be new soil disturbance and stuff. Okay, so we're not anywhere close to that. We don't have to worry about stormwater management or being a major application or anything like that, correct? Okay, that's that. Environmental letter, I'm not going to go over it in detail. I'm going to say this. The Environmental Commission is made up of hardworking volunteers just like you are. We understand their work. We see these comments. We've talked already about the one target in the letter, and that's the buffer adjacent to the residential property. We've said what we're willing to do. We think it's reasonable. It's a pre-existing condition. I appreciate the tools they're looking to employ, but I think this is the wrong project or application to try and do it. This is a pre-existing, almost 89% impervious coverage. The small recovery of any space is really de minimis in terms of the scope of this project. And the suggestion that we put in a rain garden along that whole sideline, forgive me if I think it's just inappropriate. So we recognize the need to try and enhance green areas, try and claw back even the smallest little spaces, whether it's gore striping or some gravel by an entrance, but to widen that whole strip to create an area that will probably be difficult for someone to identify who has to maintain it. Certainly, we're not going to allow stormwater runoff to go into it because it would jeopardize the neighbor next door. Certainly, the guardrail provides a practical impediment to any kind of changes, and we think that what we've offered to do is reasonable. So that's the end of my direct questions for Mr. Rapp. I'm tired. I'm getting old.
Aren't we all tonight?
Older, excuse me, older. My wife yells at me when I say I'm old. So,
typically, we don't hear any new testimony after 11. But since the witness is here, I think the board, if it has any burning questions, rather than delay them till next month.
You talking about Starbucks? Or this witness?
This witness.
Oh, okay. I was hoping you'd let me go to Starbucks. It's okay. No, it's all right. I'm not going to push my luck.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, I can start off some questioning.
I'll say that, let's have the board do some questioning while we're still fresh in our
And
minds.
it also may give us an opportunity then if we need to respond, because obviously we're not finishing tonight. If we need to respond for next month, it'll help us to be able to do that. So please.
How much space do you need for two-way traffic?
I think the township standard is 25 feet, or no, maybe it's, might be 22 feet typically is 24.
Okay, so you have on that side property going for the existing dwelling, the residential area, you have 31 between the parking space and the building. So you do have room. I know you keep saying that you don't have room, but you do have room if you wanted to make a buffer zone.
We don't have room to increase it to the 15 feet.
No, you don't have a 15, but you definitely have another 6 feet
With the parking?
with the parking.
Does that take into consideration the fire zone?
Well, you're using 22 feet with the fire zone right now.
I don't have it in front of me, so I'm
You
just asking
subtract
some.
4, you're at 27 with the fire zone. So 27 is close like to industry standard, which is 24 feet. That's why we weren't offering to make it wider.
And are there parking spaces necessary? I'm sorry, you can go through the count again.
It is, it's to meet the Starbucks requirement. They require 27. With those spaces, we get 27.
I thought you were removing 4 chairs, so
Yeah.
that could remove two
Well, that's
two
to-
parking spots.
That's to
and then-
remove 2 required. So right now, we're proposing 70, 72 are required. The 4 chairs just get rid of the requirement. They don't change.
Don't change what we're
anything.
providing.
Yeah. The other thing is, you mentioned there was excess parking on the site. Is there a way like employees could like of Starbucks park, like say behind Ray's, like the pizza place, and then those 5 spots could come out?
Well, okay. The 5 spots are still there to meet the requirements.
Correct.
If you conceptually say we don't need them, in essence, effectively, maybe not legally a variance, but for the sake of this conversation, reducing the allocated requirement, yeah, we could take the 5 spaces out, and we have 5 less. But it doesn't change how many we have overall on the site. It's still 5 less, whether you have the employees park down by Ray's or park somewhere else, you're still reducing available spaces.
But I think they're making an argument to increase the size of the buffer, if I'm not mistaken, down in that area.
I see the, what you're trying to do. It may be that we could come somewhere, look, effectively, the 15 feet doesn't work. I think we can all agree we're not going to have 15 feet. The 5 feet that's there, so the question is there somewhere in between where you can give enough lip service, if you will, because that's the way I view it, to expanding that space to maybe make it 8 feet?
I have a question. Is there a problem now? Is there
A problem with the neighbor?
yeah, like, is there a drainage problem at all? Are we?
No.
So what is trying to be cured? I'm asking, like, we're asking to fix something that's not a problem, or?
Well,
I'm not trying to be cute, but
I'm trying to improve the
They
existing.
did ask for.
I mean, somebody wrote the whole zoning ordinance with a certain vision in mind, right? And
correct, but it's existed, I mean,
Divergent
usually,
Let's
you know,
try to adhere to it.
from it,
The space
well,
that
but it's
was-
pre-existing.
The space that was there first, right, was business use, specifically a bank. So you had it open 9 to 4 during the week, closed weekends. So now you're introducing assembly use with specifically a restaurant that's going to have 7 days a week open, right? So
How does that affect
there will be
drainage?
more traffic
But
with
how do-
residents or in
Okay,
residents.
are you talking about drainage, or are you talking about a buffer? Okay, so your issue is the buffer, not runoff.
The buffer, yes.
So this has nothing to do with the rainforest or whatever, the rain garden?
Part of the environmental recommendation was to increase the buffer to 15 feet, make the driveway one lane, one way, which is totally
Right.
unacceptable, all right? And in that 15-foot, to then install environmentally friendly shrubs and a rain garden,
Right.
among other things. So the
Which in
whole
effect
idea was.
increases the amount of permeable space.
Right, but that's not what I'm,
Yeah,
right, but,
So that was what I think they're
so
responding to.
the issue being responded to is the buffer as far as nuisance as opposed to runoff.
Correct.
Fine, okay, that's what I thought you were trying to address it because of runoff, which is not an issue.
No.
Right, okay, all right.
No, I think if I'm getting it correctly, the question deals with trying to acknowledge the Environmental Commission's desire to increase open area, open space, green space, and looking to see if this was a whole new subdivision or a whole new site plan, starting from scratch, you'd be adhering to 20% open space, you'd be adhering to 15% buffers, because that was what the ordinance was originally intended to try and encourage. That ordinance came through 30 years after these whole things were built. So we're dealing with a pre-existing. Now, I understand, as I said in my statement about the Environmental Commission, that, you know, we understand the desire to try and encourage open space. Let's not forget that this applicant gave up about 4,500 square feet of open space when we dedicated the 12-foot strip of Pompton Avenue, which was lush lawn, shrubs, and, you know, street trees. All right, so,
That's why I thought.
yeah, and so that was, it's my calculation.
You're making the argument that they're going to be doubly punished. I mean, I'm going to throw it out there for you.
Yeah.
Okay. And I understand that, but from the, they're simply asking the question, because I'm looking here, you know, the maximum impervious coverage. I mean, the requirement is 80 or at 89. So if you did what the environmental, not the whole 15 feet, that's off the table. But let's say you brought it out another, I don't know, except 5 or 6 feet from where it is now, you probably would get closer to the requirement, you know. But to your point, you're just saying that you're penalizing our applicant for having done a good deed because he had a whole bunch of impervious, pervious land that he gave up to help the traffic flow. Okay, and now you're coming, the Environmental Commission, and they're, once again, they're writing this from the perspective of a new look that towns are taking on, you know, the need for, it's not technically stormwater management, but it is. You know, it's related, because you don't need as much stormwater management if you have pervious surface.
You're taking the water out of being diverted into the stormwater
Right.
system and hopefully recharging it somehow into the ground.
And this is not the first application where this has come up in situations where, you know, you've had what we'll call a pre-existing condition, but if the chair, I defer to the chairman on this, you know, we're not bound by necessarily the precedent of a pre-existing condition, am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's why this discussion is taking place.
And in this particular case, if we were looking to recapture some of that buffer zone, we would probably waive the required parking spaces. You could remove those parking spaces and we could waive that and
Yeah, you know, you could, but I'm not sure that the site really wants to have less parking, because there's a reason why their standards are there that make it a requirement. But, you know, here's what we can perhaps come back to you with. We might be able to expand that buffer by, say, I'm going to say somewhere between 5 and 7 feet more, and still have the parallel parking. Gets it further away. I don't think it's a good idea to put depressed curbing or gapped curbs there to allow the runoff from the lot into the buffer to support the open area, because the next door neighbor is either level or downhill from us a little bit. And I think, yeah, that's fine in a little small storm, but I don't want to encourage our stormwater. At the sake of trying to do a good thing, I don't want to end up hurting the next door neighbor. So it would be my suggestion that you look at it as a recovery of permeable surface, shrub it a little bit better. I'd leave the guardrail in because that provides, I think, a huge safety issue. Pull the curbing away, maybe add another 5-7 feet, depending on what we think we can work out and still keep good traffic movements.
If we
in
increase
the
it
parking
to
spaces.
10 feet,
You could get to 10?
then we can get to 10 feet, yes.
All right, and fill it full of
Would that help
shrubs.
you guys out with
I
your
don't
concerns?
think the stormwater management, a rain garden won't work, because you need to dig down in depth. So you could put a rain garden in, but you won't be able to get a planted buffer.
No, I think right now
So
we're
I
just
think-
looking
I
to
think a
expand,
planted
you know,
buffer
I
makes
don't,
more
You're just
sense
looking to
here.
make
So
some
it's
more
big-
open space, and I
take
get
the
that.
more open space, maybe to satisfy your concerns and the concerns of the environmental commission. Maybe there's a middle ground, if I can use that
I
expression.
think I used that term already.
Okay.
All right, and the fact is, we're not stupid, we talked about it, and we probably can give you something. Do we want to go to the expense of moving the curb and all that stuff? We'd rather not, but we're repaving anyhow.
Yeah.
All right, we'll
So
resurface.
there was testimony that there was 170 spaces provided on site, correct?
112. Oh, 170.
There's 170
170 on
existing.
the overall site.
Okay, so, and then 112 are required based on the uses and whatnot, correct? So you have an extra 58 spaces on this site,
Well,
right?
here's the problem with that. Okay, we have leasehold agreements. This section doesn't have the right to go use the parking that's on the Acura site plan that's been approved for Acura.
Depending upon whose interpretation of this lot you're buying into. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the problem is, there are spaces on the Acura side of the usage line, if you will, but as a practical matter, they're not gonna let us go park our cars over on their lot. They're gonna say, you've leased this to us, it's our space.
Well, is that
So we've gotta-
something that we take into account? I mean,
I think we would have to if they're leased with these other
Well, they're
people.
not looking for a parking variance. I mean, you could take it into account if you think that the 10-foot buffer is not sufficient. If you're looking at Plan B of what, of.
We'll come back next month because we're obviously not gonna
You're not gonna
finish.
finish.
And we'll do a concept plan showing where we think is the most appropriate. I will encourage the client to make that buffer as wide as reasonably possible without impinging on good traffic flow and the 5 spaces next to the curbing. And we'll see how much we can squeeze. And we'll landscape the hell out of it in front of the guardrail. There's already sprinklers there, there's irrigation there, so that will be there to help whatever is planted. It may not be exactly what the Environmental Commission would envision were this to be a new application, but I think it's a reasonable approach on how to go and at least say, you know what, this board considered their thoughts, considered what's right, and you got the applicant to do something practical to try and achieve it.
And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, these people are all volunteers and they're very conscientious in terms of their commenting. And we just can't ignore
You don't
it.
want to do that.
Okay.
Okay, I get it.
Yep.
All right, so is that a fair approach for next meeting? And do you want to add any more questions to give the engineer any more guidance on other concerns you might have?
Did a pretty good job.
and just to confirm, so where that gate is in between the Acura spots and the other spots, would they be opening that and cutting through?
No.
That's
No.
permanently locked, or
Well,
might well just be?
It's locked, but it's only open under, when they need special reasons to get back there. But they park their cars back there, employees' cars, but they come in from a different direction. Yeah, it's really for emergencies.
And all the extra spots are on the Acura side.
Yeah, but by our count, we have enough to meet the needs of our uses on our side.
Right, but your side also includes, like what Pete said, that
Yeah.
no matter what this
Yeah,
one, right?
yeah, what we described right at the very beginning, the lower lot below Ray's up to Claremont Avenue. There we have 70 spots. We now have demonstrated that we don't need more than 70 because we took away 2 seats from Starbucks. So we comply. All right, so any other questions for us? Because I know you're not going to let me start with Mr. Cruz.
While we're on here, before we let our engineer go,
Yeah.
if there is anyone in the audience who has a question of the engineer on the testimony that he's presented tonight, and this is questions, at this point, you can ask him a question for facts and details and data. Making statements is reserved for later at the end of the presentation. If you're going to be asking, we have rules for this. You have to come to the microphone, state your name. You do not need to state your address. State your name and ask him the question.
Up here.
Sorry.
I'm Cindy Chen, and I live next door. I'm the property owner. You're telling me that there's a 5-foot buffer between my house and where what is?
And the curb line.
And the curb line?
Correct.
Okay. Just a question again. Does that look like 5 feet? Like, I don't know where the curb line, what you're talking about.
That it's from the survey, so that is a surveyed property line and a surveyed curb line. So there's 5 feet.
From where?
Ms. Chen, I'm sorry, this is, okay.
I'm not understanding.
You have to please, well, we can't use your phone and ask the witness because we don't have a record.
Oh, okay. It's,
Okay.
I don't know. It's
We can't,
the,
so.
I just want to know what that
Your question of the
means.
witness was, is there 5 feet? And he said yes.
How, and I want an explanation because I visually do not see 5 feet.
Okay, and if the witness then could just, what is the basis of your knowledge?
It's from the survey, so the property was surveyed, and it's the distance between the curb line, which is the buffer they give to their property line.
Okay, I visually don't know what that means. Because when I see it, but I can't show you the picture, I don't know what that means.
So would want to look at it closer, but your curb line may be on the property. You don't see it on the sheet. I have to blow it up. But it is basically this distance right here. This curb line to this property line measured from the survey that was done by the surveyor for the property.
How would I get another copy of a survey? Just so I could see it.
We can send it to you as well.
I would love to, yeah. I would like to see that. And then I could come back next month and let you know. That was one thing.
But this is what we're looking at. We're looking at these. So from the property, we're going to push this out. So we're in conflict for that next.
Okay, but you're just saying it's currently 5 feet.
It's currently 5 feet per the survey that was done.
Okay, and you can send that to me, if somebody can send that to me, please. Okay.
I'm sorry, is it 5 feet from the property line to the outside face of the curb?
Yes.
Okay, I'll save everything.
Is Ms. Chen the property owner that just had the
I'm the
fence?
property owner.
Did you just have a fence put on your property
About a quarter of it was replaced.
that they were talking about?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Is that fence on your property line? No. It's on,
It's our property.
it's on their okay, all right. I just,
And then everything else, I have 220 fence now because they only did.
okay, well,
But we could talk about it. And then the tree that's there, that's.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Chen. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to ask a question of our engineer? Okay, seeing none, we'll excuse our engineer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Dusenberry, would you like to give us a little preview of what we can expect in August?
Yeah.
Assuming you'll waive the time.
All right. I have Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz, are you available in August?
If I'm not, somebody from Starbucks.
All right, so Starbucks will have someone here to talk about the layout, the building, the materials, the facade, how it works. You've got color renderings actually as part of your application package, which you'll affirm is what it's going to look like. We'll talk about mechanicals on the roof and the screening and all the things that Mr. Kincaid has put into his engineering report. And then we'll have Mr. Jar, who is our traffic consultant, who for the last 4 years has nursed this traffic signal project to its culmination of the footings actually being in there. If you notice they're orange stanchions, the footings are there, we're waiting for the signal. So it will be those two witnesses, and then batting cleanup, as always happens, will be a planner who's going to talk about the variance justification for primarily the pylon sign. But honestly, you heard all the justification tonight, but you still need a planner to say the magic words.
Okay, just so I can confirm with our scheduling staff, do we have other cases coming in after this in August? Has anyone been assigned?
Well, yes, only one before you threw out this on right now.
Okay,
But they will be first up.
These guys will be first up.
these guys will be first. That's what I just wanted to clarify. So there's one, let's not put anybody else.
Yeah.
Mr. Dusenberg, do you consent to carry the application?
Mr. Becerra, the applicant consents to any extension of time period necessary for the carrying of this application.
Thank you.
Good.
Chairman, if the application is carried, the public will not receive
Any notes?
further notice. The next meeting is August 8th, and then the new start time is 7:30 p.m.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If we could, board still in session. We have no need for an executive session this evening, please. So I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Till August. If